Back in 2023, me and my partner were both living at his mum's house. Most days we'd get home from work about 5 p.m, get dressed, and then we would go to these woods in the hills just outside of the town that we live in. For context, these woods as a whole are 12 miles long and 4 miles wide. There's breaks in the woods of farmland and fields creating separate woods over these hills with different names. You can walk through these woods if you want to. There's paths winding through most of the woods as trails, and if you want to, you can walk over the span of the hills from one side to the other. You can if you really want to, but most of it's through the woods and uphill if you're coming from the south, so most people don't. The one that we always went to is called Wind Down Woods. So, me and my partner, we would go to these woods nearly every day after we finished work, just to go for a walk or a smoke or maybe even both. We went about doing our usual routine, walking around and talking about our days, following the trail in these woods that loops around a large set of trees, with more around you on the outside too. It would kind of look like a messed up donut from a bird's eye view, I guess. Anyway, we were walking on the path that takes you back up towards the top of the woods. That path also takes you down towards the car park once you get to the meeting point of all the paths together, when we see this man in the distance walking down the path at Point B. Point B are one of the trails that just goes up into the woods beyond Wind-Down. We've still got to get to the meeting point of all the paths to get back to the car, and at this point he's pretty far away from us still, but I just had a bad feeling though, because the first thing that I noticed about this man when we got closer was that he was wearing office shoes and carrying a pair of hiking boots whilst seemingly on a walk in the woods. We were talking about this as we were walking up and sort of laughing about how strange it was. The guy was walking faster than us as he was going downhill and reached the meeting point of the paths a few minutes before we did, but we could see him the whole time. When we got to the meeting point of the paths, all he did was sort of, stand there. He didn't do anything. He just sort of stood and was looking around. I had a really bad feeling at this point, as he didn't even look like he was lost. He just looked like he was waiting for something. Me and my partner were pretty weirded out at this point and were thinking about turning around and heading back down into the woods and going back around the long way, just to get away from this guy's weird vibes. In the end though, we decided that walking back down into the woods would ultimately look way too suspicious, as the man had definitely seen us walking up the path towards him, the same time that we'd seen him walking down. So we just kept walking up, and the whole time this guy was still just standing there, looking around with these shoes in his hands. Having no other choice than to walk past this guy to get to the path down to the car park, we went up and we went past him. Getting close to him, I saw something that worried me more than it weirded me out. The guy had a backpack on and there was a handle coming out of it. 100% the handle of a hammer or maybe an axe. I knew it couldn't have been anything else. He hadn't been on a phone all that time that we'd seen him, not even when he was loitering around. Just more and more stuff adding up and freaking a man out. But as we walked past him and started down the path towards the car park, the guy decides now that he knows where he needs to go without getting a phone out or a compass or anything, and starts walking down behind us. I was freaking out, and so was my partner, who doesn't usually get paranoid about stuff like this because I do it all the time for, no reason really. But there was something about this guy that just wasn't right. Also, there were no other cars in the car park except for mine, so he had no real reason to be walking out there. We were walking as fast as we could without running away from this guy, and after what felt like a lifetime, we got to the car, locked the doors, and we drove off. I didn't even look back. To this day, I think about this guy and how strange he was acting, but then again, I think about how strange we were probably acting, and maybe the poor guy was simply on a walk. Anyway, cut to just the other week, and me and my partner are at our friend's house for their birthday, just hanging out, meeting their other friends that we haven't met before, having a blast. But as usual with every small group hangout, It got late and we started talking about weird experiences that we had and spooky encounters. Obviously, we told everyone about our encounter with the really strange man in the woods. A couple of the girls at this hangout, they work at a reserve called Finn Court. It's one of the woods in the hills that I've been talking about, and they seemed pretty rattled by the story that we had told, and said that they had one that would make it worse, but they had to tell the group now. Plus, we needed to hear this, apparently. So one evening at work, E was on a closing shift with her manager, and they'd been cleaning up the cafe and doing final checks when E's manager tells her that he's going to do the rest by himself and that she could just go home. Who doesn't want to hear that, right? So off she goes to her car, sits there a little bit to chill and roll a cigarette before driving home, and later that night she gets a text saying, "Don't ask, just don't come into work tomorrow." He finds out that after she left work, her manager had finished cleaning up like he said and gone to his car to leave, and getting into his car, a man approached him from out of the woods and started wrestling with him to try to steal his car keys. Managing to get the man off and get into his car, the manager drove away and instantly called the police. After talking to the police, they connected some dots of a call that they'd had earlier that evening from a concerned neighbor living in a village a couple of miles from Finn Court, reporting a suspected burglary of one of her neighbors. Another call from a mental health institute in town about as far away as ours from these woods from the opposite direction, saying that one of their patients had escaped. And it turns out, after the police put the whole story together, that this man had escaped, got a haircut, and then walked miles to this village in the middle of nowhere, broke into this house that he thought was abandoned. It was actually the home of an elderly couple. The man was completely disabled and wheelchair-bound, and his carer was his wife. And the man actually murdered the elderly lady and just left the man in the house before leaving and walking into the woods, wandering around them and looking for someone with a car that he could steal from. That's when he ended up at Finn Court and tried to take E's manager's car, running off into the woods again to find somebody else. And me and my partner, we are very sure that this is the same man that we saw acting suspicious at Winedown all that time ago, as their story was from the same month as ours, and the time frames matched up perfectly to when we would have seen him after he had tried to steal the manager's car and ran back off into the woods again. The police actually caught this guy the next day as well, just wandering around in the woods up there. He was following us back down to the car as well, but who's going to jump two guys in an open space where one of us could have easily made it to the road? I think he was trying to freak us out and get us to go back into the woods, to be honest, when he stopped at that meeting point and was sort of loitering around. I don't know for sure, but I suspect that that was his plan. Whatever the case may have been, this still horrifies me to this day, and it feels good to get it off my chest and share this with someone. This whole thing still horrifies me to this day, and it feels very good to just get it off my chest and finally share it with somebody else. For a little bit of background, this was at my family home when I was a teenager in rural Indiana. I had already had other insanely weird ghostly experiences at this house and property, and I am all into the weird and the unknown. Although this experience actually gets me panicked anytime that I think about it. I was walking my puppy Apollo by the woodline at night. We had a big yard, so obviously he had no leash on. This tree line was attached to a huge amount of woods. It was pitch black, and I usually am always paranoid in the dark, but I felt really weird that night for some reason. It really felt like something was, well, watching me, I guess. Like the physical reaction your body gets to it, like being stalked almost. I soon realized that maybe I was more than paranoid and started to walk back down the gravel road back home, which was a bit away. We lived in an area where people would be caught hiding in the woods from the cops all the time. It was an area with a lot of meth addicts, so I wasn't taking any chances. And well, I took only a couple of steps back when I heard this giant sort of thunk sound. It legitimately sounded like somebody had dropped a bag of bricks from up high somewhere. The sound came from inside the woods though, and it sounded like it was parallel to me. Now, I had my dog with me, so I was going to yell "he bites," assuming that it could have been another guy on the run, but before I said anything, this tall, I believe 7-foot figure at least, comes out of the tree line. Whatever it was, it had sickly white pale skin and was completely starved. I could see its bones poking out of the cloth that it wore around its waist. A human-like body with our hands and feet, but really lanky limbs, and an abnormally wide chest. The face was genuinely the worst though, and the most confusing part. Imagine a deer skull without antlers, but also much wider and flatter on the front-facing part. No indentations for nostrils either, and it was just flat and smooth. Although, unlike a skull, it was covered with some sort of sickly pale skin maybe. It had 2 sets of eyes and looked to be no mouth. It wore some sort of wooden headgear that I couldn't take time to comprehend. No ears, but had short tangled dark hair on the back of its head. The look that I exchanged with this creature was short, but I'll never forget it. The most insane part to me though is that it almost looked as terrified as I was. It looked surprised to see me and even froze in place as we looked at each other. Didn't reach out to me and just sort of, looked at me. The eyes, though, were pitch black like an animal's eyes. Really, it was a lot like a deer in the headlights. My dog, being smart, immediately ran and waited for me at the foot of our porch until I snapped out of it and ran too. Honestly, too, I can't say that I blame the little dude for leaving me there either. I mean, at least he waited, I guess. But I looked back while running and saw the figure fade into the woods, and that was the last that I saw of it. Fast forward a week later, though, and that's when I started getting knocking and scratching at my bedroom window every single night. My window was up high too, at least 8 foot off the ground, and this went on for a week until I asked my friend who lived next to me to go outside and tell me what they saw. While I was on the phone with them, hearing the scratching against my window, they said that they couldn't see anything. They thought that I was the one scratching and that I was messing with them, but genuinely I wish I was. This went on for months as well after this, while I had awful nightmares all the time. Eventually they stopped and my dreams became sort of less apocalyptic, I guess you could say. And after some research, I have to wonder, was this a Wendigo? I didn't think that they would be afraid of humans or look like that. Is it something entirely different? I have no idea. All I know is that I'm very grateful that it all ended, and I've been sitting on this for years, wondering all this time what the heck that was. So I've only ever had sleep paralysis once a few months ago, but the experience has repeated in my mind every so often. I was in bed, home from college. I'd woken up in the middle of the night and the hallway light was on. I rarely even turn it on though, so I know that I didn't turn it on. It's possible that my dad did, but that would be unusual. Anyway, peering around the corner is a pale woman with shoulder-length straight black hair. She was wearing a polka dot black and white dress. She smiled at me the entire time, but her expression was slightly uncanny valley, I guess. Creepy and unsettling, but the smile also felt genuine, if that makes sense. I didn't feel like she was malicious or anything, and she stayed still and just sort of watched me. The whole experience lasted maybe a minute before I broke out of the sleep paralysis. The experience obviously freaked me out, mostly because I have a fear of home invasion, but whenever I remember the experience, I don't feel the same terror that I did in the moment. Again, that was the only time that I'd ever seen her. Now, I live in Central Florida, and this past week I had been hit by Hurricane Milton. I'm okay, by the way. Just some flooding in the area, but luckily no damage to our house. I was sleeping on the couch because I'm paranoid about windows breaking in through rough storms, and my bed is right under a window as well. I woke up in the middle of the night, and the storm was still going strong. I know that I wasn't under sleep paralysis or anything because I immediately started petting my cat, who was anxious from the storm. I looked out of our back door, and that's when I saw her standing in the middle of our screened-in patio. She had the same expression and was wearing the same dress. I just stared at her, looked at the lock to make sure the back door was locked, and then back at her again, and she just didn't move. After a little while, maybe a minute or two, it was like I blinked and she was just gone. I've been going over it in my head non-stop, and the only thing I can think of is maybe I had a weird false awakening or something. Either that or I'm going crazy. I don't remember waking up a second time, but I feel like it makes the most sense, or maybe it was like a stress hallucination or something. Whatever it might have been, I would really love your opinions. I consider myself to be a very spiritual person, but I admittedly am not very knowledgeable about anything specific, I guess. I basically just want to be more knowledgeable on why she's visiting me, who or what she is. I'm confident that I'm seeing her for a reason, but I just have no clue why. Some maybe relevant additional context is that my mum died 1.5 years ago, but she didn't look anything like this woman. I genuinely don't think that she was a malicious entity or anything, which is why I spoke about sleep paralysis before. She looks generally unsettling, but not threatening, I guess. I really don't know how to explain the vibes. I have no history of hallucinations in my family's medical history or anything. I do have some mental illnesses, but no family history of any other disorders that would cause this. So, if you have any idea as to what this could be, then please, do let me know. I was in my early 20s and went camping with my spouse and another couple. Way up in the Smoky Mountains, about an hour from the nearest small town, there are 2 to 3 other sites, but none close enough to hear anybody. It's probably 1 a.m. and we're sitting around the fire talking, and we hear somebody whistle the Hunger Games whistle 3 to 5 times. We laughed it off and kept talking, figuring that it was another camper out for a stroll or something. We do live in crackhead capital after all, and people do some weird stuff here. But let me set the scene here a bit. So my friends were on the opposite side of the fire, facing the rest of the camp. My back is to the camp, and I'm facing the woods. My dog is asleep by me. It's fall, and there are leaves everywhere, and walking through camp was crunchy. And about an hour or more later, after the Hunger Games whistling, I just feel eerie. Like, it's pitch black all around us, and I've always been a little scared of the dark. I turn around and glance behind me, and I felt like I saw, or thought I saw, something white and then something black. I even said, "That was weird," and we kept talking. It had to be my mind playing tricks in the dark because, well, I'm a bit of a pansy, but a few minutes later I still feel weird. I turn around again and my eyes focus on the white and the black. I can now tell the white is the top of a shirt and white short sleeves. I literally screamed, "Who the heck is that?" and flashlights immediately click on. A federal marshal introduces himself. A game warden was with him. I literally saw his white t-shirt and black vest in the dark, and he was no more than 5 feet behind me for who knows how long. Like I said too, it's very crunchy out, and my high alert cattle dog never heard them either. Anyway, I'll cut the end short, but they checked all of our alcohol. He wanted to know where to buy my blackberry whiskey, and looked in cigarette packs and located a roach my friends had smoked hours earlier. He said that that's mainly what they do in the area, is listen in on camps, and they try to do drug busts, that they park way down the road and walk into camps. He said that they wouldn't have even bothered us if I hadn't noticed him, but They wrote my friend a $300 ticket for the roach and disappeared back into the dark. It scared the living heck out of us, to say the least, and I don't think any of us spoke the rest of the night, and we packed up early the next morning and went home a day early. We camp a lot, and 10 years later I still get a little bit sketched out after dark. How 4 people and a dog could be snuck up on in the woods like that, it still very much creeps me out. This story happened to me about 5 days ago. It was on a Saturday, and for context, I'm a 16-year-old French boy. So, I was with my friend this Saturday in my little French hometown, casually hanging out at the border of the town for a whole hour. My friend here is a 17-year-old girl. We were sitting on some big rocks behind the kindergarten school of our town, right in front of the beet field around 8 p.m. The sky was starting to turn dark, and nothing has ever really happened in our town since we've lived here, except recently when a horrific stabbing account happened with a family. It really has nothing to do with my story, but I note it because, like I said, nothing ever really happens here. Anyway, I was sitting with my friend eating stuff like we casually do when we hang out, when suddenly I spotted a man with a beanie. He had his hands in his sweatshirt and was directly walking toward us. He was way too close for my friend and I to just get up and walk away at this stage, but he comes right in front of us and starts talking in English. My friend doesn't actually speak English, so she didn't really know what was happening at the time. This guy comes right in front of me when he noticed that I was able to speak English and tries to shake my hand, which I deny the approach. Note too here that he didn't look like he was drunk or under drugs or anything. This weird guy though starts talking to me, and he points out the field that was behind my back, which means that if I wanted to look at it, I would have needed to turn my back to him. And then he was sort of very insistently saying, "Is that cabbage?" I responded yes, but he wasn't satisfied by my response, since he was trying to get me to look behind me. However, there was literally the other part of the field that was in my line of sight at my left. He tried to get me to look again and again, which was kind of stressing me out because this guy was like less than a meter away from me, which means that he could have done, well, anything that he wanted to me. Then he told me some incoherent stuff like, "My driver told me there was cabbage here," or "I asked people and they didn't understand." Right after saying that, he pats my shoulder, goes behind me, and crouches at the border of the field. He tells me to come to see if it was cabbage when I clearly told him many times that it was. Even though it wasn't, I was trying to get rid of this creep, but it did kind of look like cabbage. Right when I see that I'm out of his range, I say to my friend to take her bag and start running. At first, she thought that I was joking, but when she saw me running, she changed her mind quickly. We were like 20 meters away from him, and he started walking toward us but rapidly disappeared behind the kindergarten school. My friend and I were both really unsettled by this and quickly wanted to get home. We said goodbye to each other and we split in 2 different directions. I needed to go by the elementary school that was right next to the kindergarten school to get home. When suddenly, I see the creep coming from the road that was between the field and the kindergarten school with his phone on in his hands. I quickly turned around and went to my friend's house with her, waiting for her father to drive me home. Later that night, my friend and I were talking and we suggested that it may have been some sort of kidnapping or organ trafficking attempt, since it was the first time that we saw an alone foreigner that didn't speak a single word in French. And the fact that he got up and escaped quickly when we started running hinted to me that it was just some sort of pretext to something evil, and to move away with my friend. Maybe he had texted some guy waiting in a car for them to kidnap my friend or me, since the creep was clearly trying to make us lose time with this cabbage thing. But later that night, I told what happened to a friend of mine that lives in the same town as us, and he told us that he had actually seen this guy, that he was hanging around town and acting strange. We were obviously very unsettled and scared after that event. We're okay now, I guess you could say, but I still wonder if maybe that guy was up to something more sinister. If anyone has anything to say to help us clear this up, then I would really love to hear it. Thanks for listening too, and stay safe out there, guys. I don't know if this counts as explicitly paranormal. It certainly wasn't a ghost in the normal sense, because my mother is still alive and to this day was and is in fine health when this took place. So when I was like 8 to 9-ish, I regularly stayed up late. I still do, and I think it had something to do with usually listening to my parents fighting and the fact that I was on edge when they were both in the house, but anyways, that bit's not too important. What is important is that this was another night that I was up late, or late for a child, so like 10 or 11. I had a TV in my room that I was watching, just hanging out on my bed next to my heavily sleeping sister. I think I must have gotten the feeling that I was being watched, so I looked over my shoulder and saw my mum standing over me. I still remember this too, like it could have been yesterday. It's such a clear thing in my mind that it makes me sure that I experienced it, and that I wasn't dreaming, but her face was just blank. Not literally, but there was absolutely nothing in her eyes. She wasn't smiling at me or frowning even. Her face was as neutral as it possibly could have been, and her eyes just looked empty. It wasn't like she was looking through me, like some people describe. She was definitely looking at me, and I remember already feeling weirdly uneasy just at this, but I think partly because I hadn't seen her come in. The TV, while I was definitely watching it, was basically next to the door, and I should have seen her come in, but I had been caught staying up late before, and I never ever missed seeing and hearing her or my dad coming upstairs or entering the room. And I wish that I could remember what I said, but I know that I tried to speak to her, but she didn't respond, like at all. And now that I'm putting this to words properly, I don't think that I recall her even blinking once. I tried a few times to get a reply, but every time that I did, all she did was stare at me with that terrible empty look. At some point I hid under the covers, and I remember peeking out a few times to see her still looking at me, face unchanged. Then I turned to look at my sister, uncovered by the blankets, and I remember wishing that I could have done something to hide her too, but I couldn't will myself to move because I was too afraid, and I certainly didn't want to come out from under the covers. And when I looked back, my mother just wasn't there. I never even heard her leave. Also, the TV had gone black. Not off, but on a black screen, which was weird because I know it played shows constantly, all night, and it had never been on this black screen before or after this. You know when you have a TV connected to do something, then you sort of unplug the thing? It was basically that screen, but there was no connection message, and obviously nothing had been unplugged in any way. I stayed under the covers until I somehow fell asleep though, and I don't remember how long I was awake after she left, but I'm pretty sure that it was still dark outside by the time that I was asleep. Obviously, I asked my mum in the morning what the heck she was doing, and I distinctly remember asking why she hadn't answered me. And of course, she had no idea what I was talking about. She said that she hadn't come up to see us at all, or even woken up all night. I seriously doubt it was me dreaming or her sleepwalking. It was so real, and while I recognize that sometimes dreams are like that, mine were never so grounded in reality like this, and I just have such a strong feeling about it. She's also never slept walk before this story or afterward, and the fact that she just disappeared and appeared out of, well, seemingly thin air, the whole thing just doesn't make any sense. To this day, I think it's the weirdest thing that I've ever experienced. I haven't brought it up to her in years, but now that I'm sharing this, genuinely I'm tempted to talk to her about it again and see if she might know what the heck that was. This happened to my sister over 20 years ago, but I never forgot this story, as I could tell just how disturbing this experience was for her when it happened. so she and her new husband were travelling around Australia in a camper van for their honeymoon. They were camping in a park in a remote area near the Great Barrier Reef as they were planning to go out to sea it the next day. Cane toads are an invasive species that has an out-of-control population in Australia, and as such people are encouraged to kill them. Her husband was outside behind the van after dark killing them with a baseball bat and a flashlight to spot them, when suddenly he saw movement and heard rustling in the bushes. He shone the flashlight towards the noise and was startled to see a shirtless, sweaty man crouched down there. The man yelled, "Get that torch out of my eyes," and suddenly got up and walked briskly off into the dark forest, no backpack or light. He was freaked out but decided not to follow as he was not familiar with the area. They were totally creeped out obviously and locked their doors, hoping that he wouldn't come back and try to mess with them, but stayed the night as they didn't know another place to camp in the area at. My sister thinks that he was watching them for hours though and possibly waiting for her to go out by herself to use the bathroom. But who truly knows what his intentions were? Either way, it was bizarre that he was the one being weird, lurking behind their campsite, yet aggressively accosted her husband for shining a bright light in his face. And it was the next morning that they noticed that there were several police cars driving up and down the road in the distance. They did go and tell the police what they had seen the night before, and although the cops didn't say, they have a theory that maybe he was some kind of a criminal on the run, which is even more troubling to think about. So I grew up in a small rural town on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, Australia, on a property that had 150 acres of bush that my stepdad at the time carved out some trails for me and my siblings to ride our bikes on when we weren't at school and stuff like that. Any chance that I got, I'd be out there and never experienced anything like this before. So I was the sort of kid who got a kick out of being out there by myself and always felt safe. I was always content with my own attempt at teen verse wild, and I would quite regularly grab a swag, a backpack full of snacks, jump on my bike and find a new spot to pitch up the swag to just enjoy being away from it all. I never felt in danger of any predators, since there aren't really any here, and any animal that would have even remotely come close to causing me harm would immediately dip the moment that they heard my bike, so being out there always felt quite tranquil. But this day was different. So it was about 7:30 in the evening, and being in the middle of summer, it was still fairly bright out on the trails. So I thought nothing of jumping on my bike and going for a ride for a few hours. It was along one of my favorite trails. A tree had fallen across it, so anytime that I decided to ride it, when I got to the spot that I'd have to stop and pick my front wheel up and prop it on the tree so that I could ride over it and continue. But when I pulled up to the log this day, something just didn't feel right. I was immediately incredibly uneasy. It felt like someone was staring daggers through me with 1,000 years of rage in their eyes, and it made every hair on my body stand on its end. But I looked around and I didn't see anything. And so I quickly brushed it off as just me being irrational because I had one too many energy drinks. The nearest neighbor or even anyone would be walking an hour to our property just to reach this spot, but then I heard what sounded like twigs being snapped and walked over behind me in the back of the tree line, which immediately brought my heart rate up to 11. I scanned around again and again saw nothing, but this time I just felt like I was in a world of danger and had no idea why. I started sheepishly saying, "Hello, is anyone there?" and got zero response except for the sound of twigs breaking around me. And that's when I heard it. A voice came from somewhere beside me saying, "Help me," but it sounded like two little girls saying it in unison. And man, did that absolutely flip me out. I had never been more scared in my entire life. I ripped my bike over the log and rode faster than I ever had in my entire life out of there, but as I was starting to make some distance, whatever that thing was shrieked so loud that it sounded supernatural. almost like a person screaming, but at the same time, also like a giant truck's brakes screeching. I just kept going though until I reached the other side of the property and pushed over a barbed wire fence which backed onto a dirt road, and I pelted it back home. The only person that I told about this was my little brother, and at the time he just called me a liar and we moved on from it. It took me quite a while to build up the courage to ride those trails again, especially that one, but after that, I never did experience anything like it again. I would love to hear your thoughts though on what it could have been. Every logical thing that I've always come up with has always fallen short, so I'm out of ideas and would love to hear yours. This happened a few years back when I was a sophomore in high school, probably 2017. My family and I had just moved into a new place and were renting this house. On the day that this happened, my parents were out of the house running errands, leaving my brother and I at home. We were both upstairs in our rooms, and right across the hall from each other, in fact. And while in my room, I heard the garage open. I thought that my parents had come up, so I went down the stairs to check the garage, but nothing. I went back upstairs, back into my room, and began to hear dishes moving in the kitchen. Again, I walked out of my room, looked over the stairs and into the kitchen to see if my parents were home, but nothing. I walked back into my room after this, and a few minutes later I hear voices in the house. I walk to my door, open the door, and I see my brother standing right in front of me. He also was coming out of his own room. We both told each other that we had heard our parents and began walking down the stairs. Halfway down, we were having a conversation, more than likely arguing about something kiddish, when my mum's voice calls my name. For context, at the bottom of the stairs was the door to my parents' room. They had left the door to their room open with the lights off, and it was pitch black. My brother and I instantly go quiet and sort of look into the room, while remaining on the stairs. A few seconds pass, and we hear my mum's voice again, only this time it said my brother's name. And at this, not even a moment later, my brother and I bolt up the stairs and lock ourselves in my room. I instantly call my mum and tell her that somebody was in the house. Luckily, both her and my dad were at the grocery store just 5 minutes away, but still, this confirmed to us that they really should not have been home. This is the first and only time, hopefully, that something like this has ever happened to me. My first thought was not that it was something paranormal. I mean, the voice was so clear and human-like, and matched my mum's voice, that I really believed that it was her, or an actual person at least. Of course, in the end it wasn't, and she wasn't even home, and neither was my dad. Looking back on it, I never really liked that room. It was way too dark and unsettling, and there was always something spooky about it. But I still do wonder what spoke to me, and my brother for that matter, from my parents' room that day. In the past year or so, I've seen 3 figures while working in a group home. With each figure I've seen, my brain instantly assumed that it was a specific person before quickly realizing that it couldn't have been that person, or that anyone was even there. I'm not the first person to have seen something at this group home. Co-workers past and present have mentioned witnessing unexplained phenomena, with most of the reports being of shadow figures, as in they straight up saw a shadow that moved like a person. However, when I saw the figures, they weren't shadows at all. Basically, I'd seen something and my brain would tell me, so-and-so just went into the kitchen, or so-and-so just walked past me, only for me to realize that nobody had been there. People have also reported hearing strange voices over monitors during third shift, TVs or lights turning on by themselves, or hearing doors slam with no one around to do so. Multiple people witnessed a curtain unfurl itself, and one night, 2 staff were working third shift together. They were both sitting at the table together when suddenly, one of their phones started ringing with a messenger call. She goes to answer it and sees that it was from the other staff that was sitting there talking to her, but the other staff had their phone plugged in and charged in the kitchen. The other staff goes to check on their phone, and lo and behold, it was calling the girl on Facebook. There have been a lot of creepy instances at work, and I find most of my co-workers credible, although I'm sure some have embellished their paranormal stories a little. But my first experience happened probably around a year ago. I was sitting at the computer desk in the living room facing the kitchen doorway. I was the only staff in the living room at the time, so I had to watch over the residents while the other two staff were assisting some of the residents to bed. When suddenly I saw someone walk into the kitchen, and although I didn't get a good look at them, my mind instantly assumed that it had been one of the residents. His name was Adam. We only have 3 residents in the home that walked unassisted though, and the gait and stature matched Adam. After about 5 seconds, I remembered that Adam wasn't even home though. Confused and wondering if maybe Adam had come home early from the movies with another staff member, I went into the kitchen, only to see nobody in there. The kitchen isn't very big either, with nowhere for someone to hide behind, and there was no other exit there, so if I had truly seen someone walk in there, they would have still been in there for sure. I thought that was super weird, but I just brushed it off, thinking my mind was playing tricks on me. Adam came home later on and got a bit of a kick out of it when I told him that I had seen him walking into the kitchen while he was out watching a horror movie. Now, the next experience I had happened earlier this year. Once again, I was watching over the living room as other staff were assisting other residents to bed. One of the staff came out into the living room and we talked a little bit before they took some soiled clothes to the laundry room. They came out shortly after and went into the kitchen, so I was going to go back down the hall to finish what I had to do. And that's when I thought the other staff, a bigger girl called Beth, way taller than me and heavyset, had walked past me carrying stuff to take to the laundry room. Again, I didn't get a good look at Beth, but I could have sworn that she had just walked past me. But when I walked down the hall, I almost ran into Beth as she was coming out of another resident's room, within mere seconds, mind you. I told her what had just happened, and we were both confused as she had obviously been assisting one of the residences to get ready for bed. I went right back down to the laundry room and there was nobody there. That kind of shook me up because I couldn't really find a reasonable explanation for that, and it reminded me of when I had seen Adam too. Now, this last experience literally happened the other day, and is what prompted me to speak about it here. I was assisting one of the residents with his bipad machine and getting him ready for bed when I turned and saw one of the staff, Kathy, walking past his open doorway. I remember seeing her pink sweatshirt, one she wears frequently, and assuming that she was going to check one of the other residences at the end of the hallway. When I was done, about 10 seconds later, I went to go and check to see if Kathy needed a hand. But she wasn't anywhere to be found. I called her name and she didn't respond. When I went back down to the living room, Kathy was sitting at the table. So I asked her if she had gone down the hall and she said no, and I realized that she was wearing a different sweatshirt than the one that I had just seen. Still pink, but it was a darker pink color. She said that I probably saw Sam walk by, but I told her that I was in Sam's room helping him to get to bed at the time, and that I had seen her walk by with her lighter pink sweatshirt. The other staff vouched for the fact that Kathy had been in the living room that whole time though, and this instance was the most unsettling for me because this time I had noticed a specific detail, Kathy's sweatshirt. I've only experienced this at work, mind you, and I've never really had any other unexplainable experiences in my entire life. A handful of past residents have passed in the home, although none of the figures I'd seen resembled any of the residents that I had known, or any that I had been made aware of at least. I've tried to rationalize this, but I just haven't been able to come up with any explanations that satisfy me. I get plenty of sleep most nights, so it's not like I've been having sleep deprivation-induced hallucinations or anything. I highly doubt it's carbon monoxide related. I don't believe there are any potential sources of carbon monoxide in the home, in fact, and detectors are mandatory here anyway. I was a bit stressed out on the night that I saw Kathy, but I don't recall being particularly stressed during either of the other incidences. Toxic mold? I've read that toxic mold can potentially cause hallucinations, but haven't really noted any other signs or symptoms of that in myself or any of the residences or staff working in the home. I've always been intrigued by unexplained paranormal stories, but I've also been kind of skeptic too. I've been trying to rack my brain for a logical explanation for these sightings, but can't really come to a conclusion. Like I said, I've only been experiencing anything like this at work, and the fact that other people have talked about strange things has made me think that maybe there is something paranormal going on here. It's either that or I'm starting to have hallucinations, and that honestly freaks me out quite a bit too. In any case, if you have any advice or similar experiences that you could tell me about and how you dealt with it, then I would genuinely love to hear from you. Please do reach out and do let me know. I've never shared this before, but I felt like this was a good time to do so. So, I was with my ex, who was not a good person at all. It was a rough time in my life. I was 22 and addicted to drugs, which he supplied. Though to be fair, I was addicted before we met. His family was very dysfunctional, to say the least, and his father had actually passed away a year before we got together. He had been a pastor, but he was also a very bad person. He did things to his own kids that no parent should ever even think about. But he passed away in the house where these things had happened. There's more to the story though, because his sister had been heavily involved in satanic rituals with her ex, and had actually sacrificed animals in the house. Goats, chickens, cats, things like that. Not while I was in there or anything. I would have done anything to stop that, but altogether it was a bad situation. Now one day, they were talking about paranormal encounters, and as I walked into the house, I said, "I've never really had anything like that happen to me." And well, I guess whatever was there saw that as an invitation. You see, I went to take a shower, and while I was in there, I saw a shadow that looked like someone had walked into the bathroom. I thought that it was my ex coming in for something. I looked out, and nobody was there. I figured that I must have imagined it, but then my purse flew off the counter and hit the side of the shower. That obviously freaked me out way more, and then I heard a loud bang. His mother had 2 crosses, one on the sink counter and another on the back of the toilet. The toilet and the counter were only a few inches apart, and when I looked, I saw that both crosses had fallen and somehow got caught on each other, upside down, stuck between the toilet and the sink. Well, that was enough for me. I ran out of there completely butt naked, scared out of my mind. Very embarrassing because I'm not someone who likes people to see me naked. But that night, I went to sleep and woke up with sleep paralysis for the first time too, which I had never experienced before or since then. Something was on top of me, choking me, and it was so dark and felt so evil. It was terrifying. Thankfully, eventually it ended, and I woke up the next morning absolutely petrified. I still think about this often because I like to try and rationalize things, but this one I just cannot. Nothing about it makes any sense. I often wonder if there was something demonic, or if there was just an evil spirit of his father there who had been a monster in real life, or something like that. Like I said, I've never shared this before. It kind of scares me a little bit to write about it and share it here because I don't want to bring that energy back. But I also really want to share it because the whole situation was just so terrifying and crazy and unbelievable that I just cannot keep it in anymore. My wife and I have been renting our house for the past 2 years. Sparingly throughout our tenure, we have heard running in the attic, bangs on the ceiling of the basement. I've seen shadows following me. We have heard full conversations outside of our bedroom window, locks on our doors being changed, and other odds and ends which have given us all the spooks. I'm hearing things move upstairs as I'm actually sharing this, but yesterday it has seemingly intensified. You see, when I got home from work, I came home to greet my wife and my 2 daughters. The kids were napping and we decided to play Fortnite to take advantage of the opportunity. When the kids woke up, all was pretty well and we had snack time, enjoyed our night together, and as the night was coming to a close, my oldest, 2, wanted to play a new game that she had just learned, hide and seek. She's very good at running away from us and hiding when things don't go her way, but certainly not while we play hide and seek. When it was her turn to hide, she likes to peek around the corner and watch me count and cutely lets me find her immediately. When it is her turn to seek, she's super excited and really loves it, but she can never find me. She always runs to her room first and goes under her bed, one of her usual spots that we find her. It may seem like something lighthearted and small, but we have no clue where she learned what hide and seek is, to be honest, and how to play it. She's been infatuated with playing it for the past week. Maybe she'll get better at it. Maybe I've seen too many scary movies, but it still gives me the creeps wondering where she actually learned the game. Another weird experience happened though later that night, when it was time for the girls to go to bed. I was on my way back to get my oldest changed and ready for bed when my wife said she's by the curtains, as she had just saw her walk in and they were visible from where she was sitting. I looked and didn't see her there, but she had crawled out from behind our recliner across the room. When I brought her in to change her, my wife had a petrified look on her face. She said she was staring at me with a blank face and stared at me for like 10 seconds and then went by the curtain to the corner as you were walking out. I didn't know how to explain that. Today, I went downstairs about an hour ago to our basement to put our laundry into the dryer and to find the 4 bottles of detergent and fabric softener along with a couple of other things that we keep on top of our dryer have all been knocked down. These items, I can assure you, were all standing straight up on the ground, except our laundry detergent, which had been knocked over and spilled all over the ground. I was pretty ticked off because I genuinely thought that our cat may have knocked it all off since he liked to sit in it and look out the window. But after discussing with my wife, she was down there last, our cat had been in our room all night, and all of the items were on the dryer. I went upstairs to show her what had happened, and 3 of the items were back on top of the dryer, and 1 was knocked over on the ground. We had yelled out, "Is anyone down there?" multiple times and searched the whole basement to no avail. We returned upstairs a bit frightened, and searched around our house a bit more, and we decided that whatever it was downstairs, and we were safe as long as the door was locked. We decided to head to bed, and as we're walking into our room, we heard a small girl's voice say, "Hey," coming from the kitchen, and yet our daughters were definitely asleep. We really don't know what to do about all of this, and now we're just sort of waiting to see what happens next, but if anything does, I'll be sure to let you guys know. I grew up in a very old house in the Midwest that my parents got for a steal. It was originally built as a hotel, and the seller was very motivated to get rid of it. Growing up, weird little things happened all the time. The typical malarkey that is easy to ignore for years and years, footsteps, strange shadows, the feeling of being watched or followed, swearing that you see someone in the room right as you wake up, the room in the basement that chills your blood every time for no reason, the occasional hard-to-explain moments. I moved to the West Coast in my 20s for school and self-discovery, and during a visit from my family, my sister told me that they had met a ghost in the house. Obviously, as you can probably imagine, I was pretty skeptical about that, but my entire family backed her up. She was apparently in her room and her radio had been acting up, So just on the off chance, she said, "Okay, if you're a ghost, could you just please stop it?" The radio turned off. She waited a moment and then said, "Wait, if you are a ghost, turn it on." And the radio turned on. After some experimentation, they devised a system of communication apparently. Volume up was yes, volume down was no. The digital readout on the volume was 0 to 30, so 1 was A, 2 was B, 3 was C, and so on. If the radio turned off, then it was a sort of hard no or off-limits question. Through this system, the ghost had explained that he wanted to be called Jason. He had died in the house in 1905 at age 5 when he was sick, and he lived in the house alongside of us with his kind mother and evil father. When they asked if he loved his father, the volume went to 0 and turned off. In fact, he refused most questions about his father. Apparently, he was the cause of the more malevolent experiences that people had had in that house. I was definitely intrigued, and went back home that year to visit for a chance to experience this all for myself. However, when I arrived, Jason refused to interact with me. I would leave the table and the radio would pop on. My sisters would call me back and the radio would turn off instantly. He apparently didn't want to have anything to do with me. As I thought about this, I remembered an experience that I had moving to the West Coast. I had been lying in bed one night when I felt a hand ruffle my hair playfully. I freaked out, I shot out of bed, turned on the light, puffed out my chest and overconfidently yelled, "You don't know who I am or what I'm capable of. If you try that again, you'll regret it. Don't you dare mess with me." And then several picture frames on my desk flew off onto my floor belligerently. I stayed at a friend's house that night. One night on my trip after Jason refused to talk to me, I spoke out loud. "Hey, I'm sorry if it was you who I yelled at that one night. I bet you were trying to play or introduce yourself to me and I got scared. I didn't need to be so mean to you and I understand if you don't want to talk to me." The radio then turned on. "Hey, are you Jason that I've heard about so much?" The volume went up. "Did I yell at you the night before I left?" The volume went up again, and then went back down to a reasonable level. "I'm sorry about that. Can we be friends?" The volume went up again. Honestly, it was incredible. He had introduced himself to several family friends as well. To prove that he wasn't some sort of hacked radio, he would do additional tasks too. He would ring our doorbell, he would push crayons around the table. He even did a really incredible trick for us. You see, while asking about the logistics of being a ghost, he had volume upped that he would travel anywhere almost instantly. To test it, we called up a family friend on the West Coast. This friend put out a newspaper on their kitchen table. Jason then visited them and came back to set the volume to the date of the paper. The radio turned off for a moment, then seconds later it set the volume to 17. The friend said, "So close, the paper was for the 18th. But Jason was not convinced. Volume up, volume down, 17. Volume up, volume down, 17 over and over again. The friend checked again and apologized. "Oh no, he's right. I misremembered. It's the paper from the 17th. Strangely, he refused to answer questions about God or religion. He gave us a few answers that contradicted as well. He told us that he didn't need to sleep, but that he had told my sister a few months earlier that he did. One thing he seemed to know was how long he would be there, though the volume Ouija system that he told my sister he would be around until her 28th birthday, then his family would move on to the next phase. At the time, this was a couple of years into the future, and sure enough, we never heard from him after that. During his time with us, though, he would occasionally visit our dreams, too. We would have these extremely realistic dreams where a boy in a white hooded robe would say hi to us, ask to play hide and seek with us, or ask us questions about ourselves. Then he would confirm with my sister that he had visited us. He used the radio primarily, but in the final year he got a bit better at manipulating other electronics too. He could make printers print messages, he could manipulate televisions, he even sent us texts in the last few months. My mother had texted me, "I see you, haha," when I was back in the West Coast a couple of years after all of this. I texted her back, "Did you come out here to visit? Where are you?" But she was confused. She said that she was in the Midwest at home, and her phone had no evidence of sending a text with that message to me. I texted back, "I think Jason sent me a message. Hi Jason," and I got a reply, "Hi" again, not from my mum. My sister even once got a call with a picture of Obama and the caller ID saying Mr. President, but there was nobody there when she answered, and apparently no callback number. The radio confirmed with a volume up that Jason was goofing around apparently. It was a wild few years with that crazy kid haunting our devices. My family still has that radio out, just in case, but it hasn't turned on in years. My sister is now well into her 30s, and look, I know that this will be met with a lot of skepticism. Believe me, I understand. Even I was very skeptical until I was able to meet him myself. However, I think it's finally time to share this and to also answer some questions that people might have about it. So, that's why I'm here. If you have any questions, then please do drop them below. Also, here's some answers to some other basic questions that I've received before. So, does my family still live in this house? Yes, they do. My mum and sister are around, and there has been no communication or experiences from Jason or the father since my sister turned 28. Do I realize that Jason is a demon or a lying spirit, a malevolent entity sent to trick me? Maybe. We haven't ruled that out either, but it felt pretty chill, I guess. Yes, I get that that could be part of it, but I don't know. It's hard to say. How did the parents die? It's unclear to us, but I wish we had found more info on them too. Why didn't I record it? We tried, believe me. Electronic recording was interfered with or glitched every single time though. Jason just didn't want to be recorded, I guess. Camcorders glitched, phone video didn't save or seemed to be immediately deleted. Even audio recordings didn't work around the radio when he was active. Did we ever investigate the history or death records of the house? Did a boy named Jason actually live and die there? We did actually. And we did actually find a record of a death of a 5-year-old boy from illness. But his name was not Jason though. But everything else was in line with what he told us, just not the name. How did a 5-year-old know how to read, write, and spell? Honestly, I have no clue. But he could. I personally always figured that he had picked up some tricks in the afterlife, but who knows? Others have theorized that if his family had this property at that time, that they might have been, well, socio-economically at the top of the class back then. He might have received a better education than most kids at the time, but again, I really don't know. Do you expect us to believe this? Where's your proof? I expect that some people will believe and some won't. And that's honestly fine by me. I'm not here to prove it, I just thought that it was a cool experience and I figured that some others would enjoy knowing about it too. So this story is approximately 10 to 12 years old and it happened in the Ukraine. When I was 18, just fresh out of school, I had a whole summer in front of me to do whatever I want before starting in university. Through our PE teacher, I got an offer to make some extra money during summer, and I happily agreed. The job was being a counselor at a children's camp for the summer. Basically, I had to watch over them, organizational tasks, hiking, etc. It was my first job and I was happy to make some money for myself. Also, me being 18 and receiving the oldest group, 15 to 16-year-olds, that was a huge bonus to it as well. I was young enough to understand them, but older enough to be respected and listened to. The first shift was pretty mild, really. Not many things were happening, and we were getting used to the job and the kids' occasional I saw something staring at us from the forest. Complaining from the kids was taken not too seriously. We just thought that they were having a hard time getting used to the territory, because most of them were city kids really, and unlike us growing up in the region, they had no idea how active the forest gets during the evening and nighttime. We thought that they had scared off some of the animals that were coming too close to the territory really. Now, about the location itself, it was huge. When you entered through the gate, you could go left or right. On the right were the warehouses. They were at the end of the territory, maybe about a 10-minute walk away. Approximately 10 minutes of walking. Also on the right was the canteen, where we would have our meals, and then there was the football field too. Nothing ever really happened on the right side, and even if it did, we could never make it out there for reasons I'll explain in a moment. But if you turned to the left after the entrance, you could see buildings where we and the kids lived. As you turned left, you immediately could see a building where the girls were, and then in the middle was the building for the really small groups, like under 8-year-olds, and on the end was the building for the boys. The three buildings formed a U shape, with a little garden in the middle, so there's enough space to gather and organize the 150 kids in the morning for breakfast. If you would try to just walk forward from the entrance, maybe about 100 meters in front of you, you would be met with a 2-meter fence and a dense mountain forest that goes up the hill. I know that that's a lot to take in, but the locations are important to have a clear picture of the encounters. So, as I said, the first shift was pretty mild. We didn't really take the complaints from the kids seriously, and then my friend arrived to work with us for the second shift when the new kids arrived, and that was when it all went absolutely pear-shaped. You see, this friend of mine was a huge chunk more into all paranormal stuff. I knew for sure that his grandma was a weird woman. She always knew when to stay calm and what people were going to do up front, like she was being told ahead of her interactions during the day. She was just always ahead of people. We were neighbors, and so I remember her from a small age, up until I got to like 15 or 16, and sadly she died later. Anyway, this friend of mine probably was educated by his grandma on how to use tarot cards and all that. He was pretty good at it all, and I won't go into details, but he could tell quite a few things about people that he just met and their family and all that, just by throwing a few tarot cards on the table. The day that this friend of mine arrived, we used the cards for fun, and that was when it all started. I believe that he was like throwing fuel on the fire or something. He always gathered people around him, and kids loved him. Extremely strong energy, and even now he has a very warm aura, though he hasn't been practicing anything for years after this story. But it started small. We were woken up on the first night from a scream from the middle house, with the smallest groups. Immediately we ran outside to the kids, and after a few minutes of calming them down, they said that someone was hitting all the windows, like all of them. We're talking about 10 to 12 rooms next to each other and the same amount of windows, really. Around 3 or 4 of them had broken glass in the corner, and we couldn't understand how someone could hit all these windows at the same time, shatter some of the glass, and manage to run away without us noticing it too. It was either 10 plus people involved, or otherwise it was just physically impossible, because we were outside in like 10 seconds or even less. The building is like maybe 30 to 4 meters long, and there's a huge fence right next to it, so even if it was a few people, we probably should have seen them, really. We calmed the kids down though, and we went back to sleep, thinking that we would just deal with it in the morning. But the morning, it wasn't better at all. We were shaken by screaming again. The girls took the younger groups out to do the morning exercise with them, and out of nowhere, an approximately 3 to 4 meter long snake started to hunt them from the garden. It was aggressive too, and absolutely huge. When I say huge, I mean it was massive, at least 2 to 3 times as long as an average person and really thick. So the guys, together with the head of the camp, running around shocked, because in 25 years of management they'd never seen anything like that. Later they told us that even the most dangerous animals are too afraid to get close due to the huge amount of people. But the decision was made on the spot that we needed to get rid of this snake because it was refusing to calm down and was trying to attack the kids. Also, it was only aiming for the small ones, it seemed. The small kids, that is. It didn't seem to care about the grown-ups, like, at all. We found some sturdy sticks and we started to hunt this snake. Finally, we managed to pin it down and it just suddenly died. I mean, we were just holding it down. The plan was to put it in a van and release it on the top of the mountain, but The snake just up and died. My guess is probably from stress, but it was weird. What we did next is low, I know this, but I regret it now, and at that point I was 18 and it sounded like a good idea. So we decided to skin the snake and put the skin on the pole that we had with the flag of our group to encourage the kids to be brave and not to be afraid of the forest. Honestly too, I still believe that that's when the gates of hell pretty much opened. We made something or someone very angry by doing that, and everything just went terribly. Probably a week later, when the first group of kids went home and we were waiting for the new kids, due to it being the second day of the new shift, basically all the kids got their stuff to the buildings and we had an extra night before they would move in. So after spending the day on preparations and helping parents move the bags in, we decided to go to the girls' dorm where the other girls who worked there resided, to have some drinks and have some fun and play some music and all that. This friend of mine was really exhausted, so he went to his bed in our dorm to sleep, and he went with some other guy. They were cutting wood most of the day, so it's understandable that they were pretty tired. For context though, the window of the room in which they were partying was looking straight at the boys' dorm. There was no way the guys could come outside without us noticing them, is what I'm getting at. There were also automatic lights above the door, so we immediately would have noticed the lights going off if they had. Also, don't forget, we're in the mountains, so signal on phones or internet is pretty much inaccessible here. Like, there's basically no signal anywhere. So, it started approximately half an hour after the two guys left. First, we heard someone using the toilet in the end of the corridor. We sort of looked at each other with curiosity, because nobody but us should have been in that building. Everyone was in the room, really. The guys are in the other building and they cannot come to us without us noticing it. Plus, they would have to have knocked on the window or the main door because we had locked all the doors at the time with a key. That's important too. It was part of our job to make sure all of the doors were locked with a key after the sun was down. With or without kids, the dorms always had to be locked. So at that, we got a bit tense, but we didn't hear anything for about 5 minutes, and so we just went back to chatting. 10 minutes passed and the girls literally screamed when someone very fast knocked on the door to the room, then tried to push down the handle. I jumped to the door literally 5 seconds later, fell on my butt along the way, and when I opened it, there was nobody. We ran out to the corridor, checked all the rooms, but there was nothing. The windows were locked, door locked on the key with us in the room. I think this was the moment when we started taking it more seriously too. We sat for a minute thinking about what had just happened, and there was absolute silence in the room. 4 girls and me with another guy. Then the silence got abruptly disturbed by a knock on the window. Just one very heavy knock, like someone slapped his palm on the window and left it there. I immediately jumped at that, waiting there to see one of the guys, thinking that we must have missed them coming outside because we were busy checking the rooms. But I can assure you that there wasn't anyone there. It was now too that I got a very uncomfortable feeling that somebody was watching me from outside. I could see the whole garden in the middle, the forest to the right over the fence, and if I really pushed my face to the window, I could even see the door handle to the building that we've been in. But no living person, no one. I gave a voice to my concerns about being watched, and one of the girls came next to me to look outside. That was the moment that I almost went deaf because she started screaming, "Who are those people?" at the top of her lungs. We calmed her down as much as we could and asked her to tell us what she had seen. She said that there were a lot of people standing outside of the building, all of them looking at us, but she couldn't see the faces because it was around midnight at that point and really dark. She said, though, that she could see their heads turned into our direction and that they were just standing there. I asked her to count them, but every time she reached around 20 to 25, she started crying and having a meltdown from fear. She said that there had to be at least 50 plus of them outside, though. While none of us could see anyone, apparently she did. Now, remember how somebody knocked on the door of the room or the window and we couldn't find anything in the building? We checked all the doors and the windows. Well, suddenly, the main entrance door, that was checked 15 minutes ago, we made sure of it because 6 people had seen it locked with a key, and the key was in the room with us on the counter. It started erratically with crazy aggression, opening and closing over and over again. Somebody was opening wide the door that was locked with a key and slamming it with the power that was shaking the whole building. At this point, even I was screaming, and after maybe a minute of suffering from this unexplainable thing, me and the other guy holding each other's shoulders and running to the entrance to see what was happening there, the sound stopped the moment that we opened the door to go there, and as you've probably guessed already, the door was locked with a key and 2 of us couldn't force it open. We were in shock, to say the least. This was the moment that we decided to seek some help from outside too. We had 2 more people, and my friend and the other guy were sleeping in the dorm across the garden, obviously. They were maybe 40 meters away at most. We had signal, very weak, but it was enough to try and call over and over for my friend. In our head, he was the most experienced with this stuff, and we had some hope that he would know what to do. We must have called probably 30 times in an hour, but there was no answer. In the meantime, the people that the girl had seen were still outside, according to her, and she was seriously freaking out with the other girls while we tried to reach my friend. We couldn't reach him for whatever reason, but eventually, after another 20 minutes, she said that she sees them walking away to the forest, just going through the fence like it wasn't even there. Even for us grown-ups, it was hard to climb that fence. It was really high, and she said, though, that they just went through it. Now, we were in there for quite some time, and in the morning when the sun was coming up, we finally got brave enough to go outside and to go and get my buddy. And he told us a crazy story of his own, too. Apparently, he got up to have some water at around 1 in the morning, looked outside the window to check if we were still up, and saw me in the window, waving to him and showing a thumbs up. I can assure you, though, that that never happened. Also, he said that he should have received some calls, but he never got one. Then he said that when he went back to sleep, just to wake up 30 minutes later from something that he couldn't describe, he said that he sat up in his bed, looked out the window and saw his grandma on the other side. Apparently, she told him to go back to sleep because he cannot go outside now and his friends are going to be fine. She will look after them. He thought that it was a dream, and so he just sort of went back to sleep. That was around the time when the girls said that they started to walk away to the forest as well, allegedly. Also, the phone of my buddy was found in the morning in the middle of the garden, while he never left the room and was checking his phone when he woke up the first time, so he definitely had it. Also, he said that he had a strong desire to come to us when he first got up, but he saw me in the window with my thumbs up and decided to stay, believing that we were fine. And so, all in all, when we put together the stories in the morning, we probably got our first white strains of hair from stress, but my friend said we have to apologize. So the next night, me and him went up to the forest. He made a small fire. We burned some herbs and loudly apologized to anything that we disturbed by our actions. And weirdly, after that, nothing really happened. There were some shadows in the forest here and there, some weird sounds in the night, but nothing like before. One of the girls managed to shoot a picture of something white passing in front of one of the windows on a Polaroid, but sadly after our work ended, we didn't keep in contact, so I can't provide the photo. Maybe my friend was still in contact with her or something, and maybe I could retrieve them that way, and if I do, I'll be sure to show it. But in the end, after working there for some time, eventually I left, and it was a crazy time, and all those events that happened that night are something that I'll never forget as long as I live. When I, a 38-year-old male, was 18, I lived in a suburb of southeast Melbourne, Australia, Noble Park. Our house, it was the odd one out. On a street of 70s to 80s brick homes, ours was an Alpine-style weatherboard home with a steep roof built in the early 20th century. It was old, cold, and noisy, and you could see the ground through the gaps in the floorboards even. We had a big dog who stayed outside until everyone was home, and then slept outside in a big pen or doghouse at night, mostly in the summer. We also had an indoor cat. The week that this happened, I was home alone and Dad was overseas. Mum and Sis were visiting family. So one night, when walking home from work, I rounded the corner and noticed a figure standing on our carport roof, looking through a window into one of the 3 upstairs bedrooms. The sun was setting, so all I could see was a dark silhouette. I yelled at it from the top of the driveway, and then it was just gone. I remember thinking that was odd, that my dog didn't bark or notice anything. I went inside and checked the house, the dog, the windows, and the doors, etc. Everything seemed to be in place. I assumed I had just seen a shadow from a nearby tree at sunset or something. The following night, I walked home from work and everything seemed normal. I checked all the windows and the doors, let the dog inside for the evening, and eventually put him and myself to bed. Now, my bedroom was upstairs, down the hall from the room next to the carport roof. Before bed, I had a routine of shutting all the doors in the house, as they were all sort of squeaky and the drafts would often blow them closed if left open. This night, I closed all the doors, checked the locks, turned off all the lights, and eventually I went to sleep. In the middle of the night, though, I was awoken by something. I'm not sure what, but when I came to, I focused my eyes and looked around. I saw the hallway light coming in under my room, and I thought that I had turned that off, but perhaps I had forgotten. Right then, my doorknob started rattling, though, like somebody was struggling to open it. I immediately lay back down on my side, facing the wall opposite my bed, and my heart starts beating hard. I hear the door open, and so I close my eyes. I figured that if someone was breaking in, that my best chance was to pretend that I was asleep and maybe they'll take what they want and just leave. I slowly open one eye, the one against the pillow so it's less obvious. I see the light from the hallway on my wall. My bedroom door is fully open. My heart is beating harder now, and I lay still. I see the digital clock on my CD player, and a little after 2 a.m. Then I hear the door creak again and watch as the light on the wall slowly starts to disappear. The bedroom door is closing, and at this point I'm positive we're being robbed, but I continue to pretend that I'm asleep. Keeping one eye open, everything is heightened. The loudest noise is my heartbeat, but I try to listen through it and I can't hear anything. No breathing, no footsteps, nothing. At this point, I begin to feel pressure around both my feet. The blanket is getting tighter around them, and it was then that I realized that something or someone is now sitting at the end of my bed. I look at the clock again, and it's now a little before 3 a.m. I'm frozen, scared, and have no idea what's happening. At some point, I have the idea to slowly readjust my position in bed and move my feet a little to see if something or someone moves or something happens. So I do this, but as I slowly readjust my feet, I feel one of them hit something solid. Something is definitely sitting on the end of my bed. I don't know what to do at this point, so I just stay still and listen while looking through one eye at the clock and the bedroom wall. The next thing that I remember, though, is hearing the first birds starting to chirp before sunrise. I look at the clock and it's now a little before 6 a.m., and I notice that the room is a little brighter. The sun is coming up. Shortly after this, I feel the pressure lift from the end of the bed. I hear the bedroom door open. I see the light from the hallway on the wall again, and then the door shuts and the sun starts to rise. I got up shortly after this, freaked out, and checked the whole house. All the doors and the windows were locked. The dog had slept through the night, and nothing from the house was missing. Weirdly, though, my cat was stuck in the bathroom overnight. He must have followed me when I brushed my teeth without me noticing and must have got locked in there or something. To this day, I'm really not sure what happened that night, but I sure as heck will never forget that night in Noble Park. So I'm from a not wealthy, you could say, third world country. It's not as bad as it seems, but not as developed as it should be, really. Several times a year I visited my grandparents in the countryside. They had several cows, sheep, chickens, etc. Regular stuff. My uncle, who was 6 years older than me, used to work as a shepherd, in fact. He was about 13 back then, and so he invited me to look after sheep with him sometimes, and I took this opportunity as a bit of an adventure. Now, imagine a green place surrounded by mountains, beautiful scenery. It was almost nighttime, and we put the sheep in circle fencing, made a bonfire and prepared to eat bread, jerky meat and yogurt, and we started talking. You know when you are young and in an open space at night you talk about scary stuff? Well, suddenly, another shepherd who was an elderly person joined us out of nowhere. We didn't mind, especially after finding out that he had sausages and many other delicious things with him. Surrounded by a bonfire in fresh air with stars as visible as the palm of your hand, it was very picturesque, when suddenly this elderly person asked if we believe in the shaitan or the devil. I said yes, and my uncle said no. He then proceeded to say, "About 2 months ago, I was herding my sheep. Usually when you herd them, there are always goats in the front. They are like the leaders of the sheep, really. They eat better grass, drink cleaner water, etc." He was explaining. My uncle then said, "Those are obvious things, so what are you talking about?" But he then said, "One goat was acting kind of weird, behind the sheep, never joined the other goats and ignored any commands. Funny thing is, my dog and horse were acting as if the goat was a snake. They didn't come near it and tried to avoid it, so I got off my horse, looked closer at the goat, and realized the goat wasn't from my herd. I said what the heck to this and tried to find any labels on it. Amazingly, this goat was white as snow and didn't have any labels or marks. Usually sheep and goats have labels on their ears like earrings sort of thing. But when I tried to look even closer to it, it actually bit me. After that, I got pretty angry and kicked it, and suddenly sort of lost consciousness. Everything was sort of blurry, but I swear to you that I saw the goat get up, shake itself off, and walk away on 2 legs. Nobody believed me, and it's kind of difficult for me to look after goats now because I'm sort of afraid of them." After his words, my uncle and I were a little bit shook. What the heck, right? Why did you even tell us that story before nighttime? We didn't sleep well that night, and we never went too close to the goats of his flock either. But what do you think? Do you think that he was telling us the truth, or was he under some kind of influence? Was he just saying this to scare us? He seemed legitimate. He seemed like he believed his own story. I really don't know what to think about that guy and his story, but something about it just really had me shook. I'm not really sure how else to succinctly describe this experience. I've been sitting on it since the summer of 2012, only having mentioned it to a few people, really. I guess I'm sharing this partly to finally put it out there, and to also see if anyone else has had similar experiences, or even an explanation of what might have happened. So, in 2012, I was living in a coastal area off of northeastern US, working for an agency that mostly monitored and enforced environmental compliance. I'd prefer to keep the state and the agency secret, since I'm not sure the legality of talking about this is all that fine. However, they issued building permits for structures and work being done alongside of protected wetland habitat. Usually these were things like piers, docks, bulkheads, etc. And what my job entailed was visiting these properties with a copy of the blueprint included within the permit application, when taking measurements and sometimes photos, and comparing them to the blueprint to ensure that the applicant did only the work that they said that they were going to do, and nothing more. Now, on this particular day, I had a few sites to visit, and one of them was to check on a dock that was supposedly built in a backyard, extending through a salt marsh and into the bay. This all took place in a fairly well-to-do area, with a lot of old money and a lot of houses that would nauseate me to find out how much they were worth. If you're picturing a neighborhood of a very spaced out, very large houses with immaculate landscaping and waterfront views, Well, you've got the right idea. What set this house apart from all the others, though, even though I parked on the street, was how utterly wrong this place looked for where it was located. It was situated at the inside corner of two streets, with another house on either side of it, and it looked utterly incomparable to its neighbors, which were both very large, very new-looking houses, as I previously described. This one, though, was a derelict-looking two-story building that looked like it was awaiting foreclosure. It had rotted wood siding, a roof that was falling apart, and a lawn that looked like it hadn't been mowed all summer. In fact, the only thing that didn't look ancient and unkempt was the white picket fence, which was pristine, as though it had been painted earlier that week. I double and triple checked the address and the blueprint, finding that while I had the right address, the house looked nothing like it did in the blueprint, appearing to be a different shape even. After confirming that the adjacent houses were also the right addresses, I approached the front door, only to find the storm door wide open and the screen door closed but torn in several places. Now, while my job did not require me to make site visits while the owner was there, or even inform them that I was arriving, I still always tried the front door first so that the owners didn't think that I was just some stranger, sort of skulking around their yard or whatever. I knocked and rang the doorbell a few times, confused by the fact that nobody was answering, since someone surely had to be home if the door was hanging open like this. After waiting a bit, I decided that the people living there might have been in their backyard, and that I would let them know that I was there when I went around back. The only problem was that there was no way to go around back. The immaculate white fence, which was probably a good 6 foot tall at the shortest, did not appear to have any gate, connecting seamlessly to the fences belonging to the two neighbors. While this struck me as odd, it was nothing that I hadn't run into before. Some people didn't have gates and would begrudgingly let me in through their front door to access their yard. But still, not expecting anyone to answer, I tried my hardest to see if I could peer through the slats of the fence. It was not the same as measuring it, but at least this way I could see if the dock had been built and quickly check if there were any other new structures back there that weren't supposed to be there. After fruitlessly trying to get a good view, I resigned myself to trying to pull myself up and peer over the top of the fence. What I found there was a blank, perfectly square yard, completely level, with grass so green and low trimmed that it looked like it belonged on a golf course. It didn't seem to make any sense being that well manicured, since I'd already proved that there was no way for someone to get a lawnmower around back. And if the owners were willing to put that much effort into the back lawn and the fence, why was everything else so unkempt? Weirder still, the lawn was otherwise featureless. No furniture, no trees or flower beds, just a solid blank square of grass without even a sunspot or wild clover to be seen. It was like what an AI might think a lawn might look like. Looking for the dock, though, I found that the fence even stretched across the back of the property, again with no gate. Now this made even less sense to me. Why would anyone build a dock that they couldn't access? Why would anyone meet the markup for waterfront property only to block off their view of the access to the water? Utterly confused, I was getting ready to just call this one a failed assignment and head back to my office. But as soon as I was heading back to my car, I looked again at the front door. Someone had to be home, right? Maybe there was some weird, esoteric way to access the dock through the fence, and maybe putting the face of a person to all of this would make the experience seem less weird to me. So I made for the windows. And they were filthy, and had ratty pink curtains drawn. But I tried my best to subtly peek through a gap and see if I could find signs of people inside. The living room of the house looked even worse than the exterior. Eggshell paint was spotted with mildew and peeling off the walls. The thin green carpet had been torn in several places, leaving it intact in some places and laying in crumpled heaps elsewhere. Light fixtures were broken or hanging limply from the ceiling, and I could not see a single piece of furniture anywhere. It was, the exact opposite of what I was hoping to see in there. And with some dread, I accepted that I would try the door one more time before, well, just calling it quits, I guess. With the storm door open, I called out into the house asking if anyone was home. No answer. I explained further who I was and what I was there to do. No answer. With my face so close to the door, I was beginning to catch whiffs of the air inside. It was sour and briny, stinking of stale water and the decay of a low tide on a hot day. It smelled like the house had at one point been filled with seawater, then allowed to sit stagnant in there for ages. Years later, I still don't know what got me to go in to take that first step into the house. I think I was growing concerned for the owner. I mean, what if the place had been ransacked and someone was hurt inside? What if someone couldn't get to the door or call out because they were incapacitated? Whatever the reason, I opened the screen door and took a step inside. Just one step. Enough to peek my head through the door. What immediately hit me, though, was the intensity of the smell from before, so suffocating that I almost choked on it. I quickly began to worry that someone might be dead inside, and I called out again asking if anyone was home and if they were okay. Now, to cut away for a moment to give a bit more context, I'm no stranger to supernatural experiences, even more so now than I was back then. Between seeing deceased relatives as a kid and the occasional glimpse of a stranger at a historical site, or flickering in and out of my vision, apparitions were still occasionally startling but seldom worrying. Usually these manifest for me as seeing the vague image of a person for a short blink of time, as though watching a video and the person is only present for like 1 or 2 frames, just long enough to barely register what you saw. More often it manifests for me as a feeling though, a subtle change in the air pressure, or an electrical quality to the air perhaps. Imagine the feeling you get when someone is right behind you. You cannot see or hear them, but their presence is somehow felt. It's like that but in greater magnitude and more focused, usually still subtle enough to ignore it if you weren't paying attention. Well, that was not what I felt in this house. As soon as I called out, that feeling of presence was incomparably loud and impossible not to notice, like a person bellowing for me to leave. I actually fell to my knees in surprise, my pants getting dirtied by some liquid the carpet seemed saturated with. The smell, the loudness of that presence, I felt like my breath was being pulled out of me. Then I heard a banging from somewhere above the ceiling. I thought it was footsteps at first, coming from the 2nd floor. They sounded like someone was stomping aggressively as they paced around in a circle, or rather the rhythm sounded wrong for the footsteps, and too loud. It sounded like someone was slamming something heavy repeatedly down onto the floor. I was already back at my car by the time that I realized that I had actually bolted. I've had many more paranormal experiences since then, but to this day, I have never experienced that kind of deep, instinctual animal panic from them. Now, if you've been paying attention and can break this story down to its basic components, you might be wondering what I later did when I went home. Could this have just been a weird house with a squatter inside? Maybe you had a panic attack and imagined some things. Well, for months afterward, that was how I justified it to myself too. Attempts to contact the owner back at the office told me that the phone number was not in service. While my boss was initially disappointed that I didn't complete the site visit, he also understood that sometimes you just can't get access and you have to try again some other time. For a while after that, the weird house fell to the back of my mind. In the fall, Hurricane Sandy hit, and that meant that my plate was full with all the permits sent to repair storm damage. It was spring by the time that I finally found the permit to that particular house again, dreading that I would have to go back. This time, I brought my work camera just in case, hoping to at least document my visit, even if I didn't get access. But the thing is that when I drove back to the address for the 2nd time, the house, it wasn't there. To be clear, I don't mean that it had been replaced with a new house, nor do I mean the house had been demolished, leaving an unoccupied lot at the corner of those 2 streets where it once stood. I mean, it was as though the house had just never been there. the two adjacent houses now seemingly much closer to each other, each occupying perpendicular sides of the corner. As with the first time, I compared what I saw to the blueprints, and indeed, the two houses were the addresses of the houses on either side of my assignment, but the house that I went there to see just wasn't there, and also appeared as though it had never been. Only that blueprint confirmed to me that there had been a house there. I took pictures of the unoccupied corner, returned to my boss with a shrug and the evidence of the house's non-existence, and the matter was eventually dropped while I moved on to other assignments. I would like to know, though, if anyone else has had similar experiences with vanishing buildings, or ones that just didn't seem real. I've had many experiences with the paranormal and interactions in my home, and I thought that I would share some here for all of you guys. So my wife is a childhood diabetic, and sometimes at night her sugar levels will drop dangerously, which can put her into a coma. I'm a very light sleeper and have trouble sleeping in general, so one night at about 2 a.m. I got up to go and watch TV, and as I walked past my wife, I looked at her and noticed two orbs above her head. One was bright yellow, and the other one was sort of a whitish, yellowish color. I looked, took a couple of more steps, and then went, "What the heck?" I backed up, and sure enough, the orbs were still above her head, so I went to check on my wife, and sure enough, she was profusely sweating, a sign of low sugar. We figure to this day that those orbs, they may have been her parents or something, and they were trying to tell us that something was wrong. On another night, I came back to bed and noticed an orb on my bed. I sat down on my bed and moved the blankets around, lifting them up and stuff to see if it was a light trick, but the orb just stayed there. I moved around, waved my hands, but the light was never blocked. But then, I heard a thump on the floor, and noticed that the orb was now at the base of our dresser, and about shoulder height of our dear cat, Winston, who passed in 2007. Still miss him a lot, by the way. We have often felt him jump on the bed or jump off like that too, but this seemed to be something else. Again, I was up watching hockey at about 4 a.m. when I noticed a black triangle zip across the screen against the white ice. Hey, there's a bird in the stadium, I thought, so I rewound the game. It was PVR, but there was no bird. Now, this isn't all that odd, I admit, but the next night I just climbed into bed when I felt two tugs on my blanket right by my shoulder. I ignored them and I went back to sleep, but the next night as I was laying in bed, I swear that I felt a heavy weight sit on the edge of the bed beside me, and that absolutely terrified me. After that, whatever it was didn't return, but my wife has a friend who can interact with spirits, and she apparently said that it was someone named Kevin. Now, this next one I absolutely hate. So I have a fan that has a safety feature, and if you touch the fan shroud, it will stop the fan so kids can't be hurt. But suddenly, every night for months, at 3 a.m.-ish, the fan would stop, and when it stops, it makes a sort of loud electrical sound, a buzzing sound. The fan never stops at any other time except then, and I always felt that there was someone standing in that corner watching me each night, and this freaked me out, so I moved the fan to an empty room, and guess what? It didn't stop. If it did stop at random times, it was on from like 10 p.m. to 9 a.m., I would definitely say electrical problem, but every night at around 3 a.m., pretty much bang on, it would always stop, which was a bit strange. Now, the reason for sharing all of the above is that this next one happened just 2 nights ago. I was awake laying in bed and I could hear someone walking back and forth at the foot of the bed, and it was keeping me awake. Then, I heard a tapping sound from our baseboard heater, then walking, then tapping, and well, this was too much, so I growled, "Will you get lost? You're keeping me awake." And right after I said this, there was a loud thump on the floor like I startled it, and the air in the room became really much lighter, I guess you could say. I have more experiences, but these are probably the best ones. I guess I'm a bit tuned into spirits or whatever, but for the third one, I think I brought it on myself, knowing that I'm a bit sensitive to all this stuff I've been saying in my mind. If any spirit needs help and you are a good spirit, I'll try to help you. And I guess Kevin needed help, and perhaps that's why he approached. But whatever the case, it was still very terrifying, and quite honestly, I didn't really expect it, I guess. But here's hoping that after this last one, things will start to calm down. In about 1999, I finally saved up enough money to put a down payment on my own fixer-upper. It hadn't been lived in for quite a while, and it actually had been used by a local church as a youth facility. It was about 100 years old on the deed. It was located in a mill village in the Carolinas, and it was only 4 rooms and a bathroom at about 800 square feet. It was on one of the bigger lots in town. Now, I was recently divorced and living with a friend who I had worked with at one time who was also ex-military, so it worked out well moving into a house. He worked in law enforcement now and wasn't there much, but paid half of everything, which gave me some extra money for improvements. We had really nice neighbors, all retired, and I had many talks over the fence with them. As you can imagine though, 2 single guys living in one place, we had many women in and out of our doors. My elderly neighbor was a retired textile worker who was single most of her life and understood our habits. As I demolished the kitchen, I tore out everything down to the bare walls and replaced plaster with drywall. As it was slow going, considering that I was going to school and working both full-time, there wasn't a lot of time for the remodeling. We did have one big table in the kitchen that we used for, well, pretty much everything. And one day, I came in from class and took my books out of my backpack and separated them by class in order to go through them quicker. I made a sandwich and joined with my roommate and his girlfriend in the next room just to catch up with the day. I just sat down when I heard all of my school books hit the floor in the kitchen. My roommate was the first to jump up with a weapon in hand because he thought someone was trying to break in. As we looked in the kitchen, not one item was on the table though. I picked everything up and put it in my backpack. I've always believed that spirits were possible, but after seeing this, I definitely had more to believe in, I guess. Puzzled that no door was open and that this happened, we just sort of joked about it and said ghost. The next day, I asked my neighbor next door if anyone had ever died in my house. She dropped her head for a minute and she said yes, 2 people in fact, a husband and wife who lived there for many years. That's not one of the first things you ask when you find a good deal on a house, I guess, and it was a lesson learned, but she said that the husband died first of natural causes, but the wife apparently had schizophrenia and lived many years after him. I also asked my neighbor if she had seen anything odd, and she said yes. She said that she had seen lights going on and off occasionally. I then said I sort of meant like, have you ever looked over at my house? And she chuckled and said no. Different things happened after that too, like we would come in and TVs would be on when we know that we turned them off. Lights the same way. I said something to my neighbor again and she said let me come over and talk to her. We had been friends before her health got bad. So my neighbor walked in and started talking to her as if she was standing right there and told her that we were good guys and we were going to take care of the house and we had to learn to live together. And amazingly enough, after that, there was really nothing else for quite a while. Now, I had finished the kitchen and started on the bathroom remodel at this point. At about the same time my roommate was making plans to move out and a girl I was dating was moving in, we were planning to get married soon. She had a son and I had to prepare a room for him with a big closet for his stuff. And it was at this point that things started happening again with the lights and TV and stuff falling off the kitchen counter again. My roommate said that he had lost his key to his room, swearing that it was on the keychain, but I dismissed it because I was going to replace it anyway. Later, when pulling up carpet for the new walk-in closet in my stepson's room, I found my ex-roommate's key, believe it or not, under the carpet that I had pulled up. And honestly, I have no idea how that could happen. I had replaced that lock when my ex-roommate moved in, and I checked and the key matched the lock. That was unbelievably odd. In the time that I was fixing up her son's room and the time that she was to move her stuff in, one afternoon I came home from school and drank a couple of beers and took a nap, only to wake up abruptly to my stereo blasting so loud that it was deafening. Mind you, this was one of those old school stereos that you adjusted volume by the knob and not a remote. I jumped up and turned it off. Irate, I remember saying something to the effect that this was my house, and if we both can't live here, I'll burn it down. I think I even said that if there was a light near where she was, that she needed to go to it. And after that, there was absolutely nothing for the next 6 years that my new wife and stepson ever experienced. Thinking back, maybe negative energy had been building up in the home for some time, because some decisions were made for her son to go into a private school near where his father lived for a better education, and even though I didn't agree, she did it for his future and I understood, but our relationship paid for it in the end with divorce after 8 years. Nothing I can remember stands out after my wife left, other than that she said that in the end that the house gave her bad vibes and she wanted nothing to do with it. I had wondered at one point if the spirit of the woman wanted me to be there, but wanted only me because there had absolutely been nothing else that had happened the entire time that I lived there alone. A few things did happen though by surprise during the sale of the home when I was preparing to sell, like the furnace needed repairs and my entire front sill collapsed right before the home inspection due to termite erosion. That happened years before I bought it, mind you, but there were a small string of events like this, of just unfortunate luck, I guess. On a side note, it was odd how other information had come to me about the residents of my home prior to me living there, through a woman I had dated when I first moved in. She had lived a few miles away, and when I told her about what had happened with the books and the table, a neighbor of hers was nearby and overheard our conversation and asked where I lived. I told him, and he said that he grew up over that way and they used to play ball in the church parking lot near there, and that the woman who lived there when he was a boy had a lot of mental issues. If they hit a ball into her yard, she would grab it and take it in her house and throw it in her wood stove and burn it, apparently. And that wood stove, when I moved in, it was the one in the kitchen. The one that I had trouble with as I was trying to sell it. So my name is Mark, I'm in my early 20s, and I've always been fascinated by paranormal stuff, but I've never really been a believer, I guess you could say. It was sort of like an atheist studying a Bible type of situation, I guess. But I did actually happen to personally experience some weird stuff in my life, and I do believe that my room was haunted on 2 occasions, maybe. So the first time was when I was 11 and my sister was 9. When my family was slowly moving to a new house and renovating it, a set of white walls, no furniture, me and my sister, on many occasions, were allowed to explore our new neighborhood. Once when we got back from our exploring trips, we just sat in our empty room and threw ball to each other singing some random nursery rhymes. When we were just going at it for something over half an hour when suddenly a ball stopped midway to my sister and went back to my hand. I was freaking, she was too, and we refused to visit for a while after that. Small clarification too, it was like this little heavier dog chewing ball and all the windows were closed, so no wind, and since the room was empty, there was no bouncing from something else. It was as if the ball just defied physics or something. As an adult, I actually spoke about it to my mum, suspecting that it may have just been a false memory or something. But she actually confirmed that me and my sister once really lost our heads over something like that, and even refused to sleep in our rooms for over a week, and it had made her really tired. Now, the next haunting, if you can call it that, happened 4 years later. This time I wasn't present, but it happened in the same room apparently, and I need to explain a bit about our room situation. So, I shared my room with my younger brother, 10-year-old at the time of this haunting or whatever, And my sister, she had her room next door. So I and my brother went to my cousin's place to have a sleepover. Since our room was bigger and we had a bigger TV and DVD player, my sister decided that she wants to sleep in there. So she goes there, watches a few movies, and goes back to sleep. In the middle of the night, my fitness or stationary bike starts running, literally like someone was just using it. It was electric, but all the electronics were long overcooked and damaged. Besides those were trackers, and they were incapable of moving the bike like it was at this point. So my sister started screaming and she went to our parents' room. When we got back, she was absolutely terrified, and I actually needed to move to her room for a while since she refused to sleep alone at all. This story was also confirmed by our mother. Also, I remember sleeping in her room on my noble exile. There were no pets at that time in the house, and honestly, it was just nothing that should have caused this. Also, my sister still swears by it, and she really isn't someone to make something like this up. So, if some of you guys listen to all of the stories here, then you'll know that someone has been watching my place for some time now. This is a bit of an ongoing drama, and I honestly wish that I wasn't sharing this right now. I've had weeks of peace with only the ping of my overactive camera system alerting me to people passing by with their dogs or children. Honestly, I thought everything was fine, and maybe this isn't the most dramatic update, but it was just another scary tick mark to add to the list. So, I got an alert to activity outside the garage. Given my garage door crowbar banger, that's the one that I always pay most attention to, honestly. I keep weird hours and I hadn't been on my phone, so at first I thought my dad was leaving for work. But then I saw the recording it made instance later. This man walked boldly up to the car in the driveway, my mum's at the moment, and tried the handles of the doors before running off. I called the police with a good description and told them that I have video about it, but my town doesn't have a large police force, and some of them are just like any department, I guess, shady and a bit lazy. I've rewatched it so many times now, and he has the same build as the man that I saw at the garage before. That's obviously not definitive, but now I have more details about his description that I couldn't see before, due to the lack of lighting and cameras and all that. I'm still pretty shaken up about this, even though he didn't try to get in or anything. I was outside not even half an hour ago, though in the fenced backyard portion. This just feels all wrong to me too, because, well, nothing is solved. And even though it might be unrelated, is that actually probable? That one person and or their house would attract so much trouble from completely different individuals? It doesn't seem likely, right? Also, just to add some information, this man saw the camera before he ran. I don't know if he would have tried more had he not, but it has like a little red and blue light on the front part that rotates a full circle. It's large and lights up a bit. That's why I thought that they deterred the creep so far. And we were eventually visited by the police, who very kindly didn't ring the bell. Parents asleep have been texted all about this, but I gave all the evidence and they actually found the guy. I don't know if we're absolute sure it was the same man that banged on my garage or watched from the window, but I do know that they caught this guy, and my video footage will be used in court, I guess. I don't know. Quite honestly, I was really doubtful that they'd actually send someone due to the chastising text message. Non-emergency was closed and all that, so I called the regular line. As I mentioned earlier in some other videos about this incident, my dad had told me that there had been a lot of car thefts in the neighborhood. But the weirdest part to me that I think I must be imagining or something is that he looks, from the somewhat fuzzy camera stills, quite a bit like the guy that I had a one-night stand with a couple of months ago, right around when all of this started. I really didn't think that it could be him, but I'm hoping that since I'm supposed to get the ring footage to the officer tomorrow, I don't have access to that one right now, I can ask who this person actually is. I'm really hoping that it's all over now. All of this has given me a lot of comfort. And unless I'm wrong and there's a second person, which is pretty unlikely, this should be my last update on, thankfully, a closed chapter. Back in August of 2023, we were staying at an Airbnb in Hatch, Utah. This place didn't have any air conditioning, considering the elevation of Hatch, and the temperature was pretty comfortable. This will be relevant later. Now, on the first night, my wife and I were out stargazing since the sky was devoid of light, pollution, and clouds. I had my GoPro set up and my phone taking photos, and we were just staring up enjoying the stars. That was when my wife pointed out to me what appeared to be a single small satellite floating across the sky. As we were looking at it, however, it then multiplied into 3 lights in a sort of triangle shape. It continued to expand in the same manner until there were about 7 lights in a larger triangle pattern. That in and of itself is pretty weird, right? But what really was just bizarre was the sky that was visible within that triangle shape more or less froze like a screenshot, and then that section of the sky was moving with the triangle while the rest of the sky around it was stationary. The best way I can think to describe it would be like in the movie Predator and his active camo invisibility tech. The world behind him was visible but sort of skewed, and this triangle passed over the sky for a few short minutes until it just seemed to either rise rapidly and disappear or shrink rapidly. It was about that time that we noticed that it had also gone eerily silent outside with us. No crickets or anything. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. We decided to go in for the night after that, as we were both pretty weirded out by it. In awe, of course, but also weirded out. I got some good pictures of the night sky, but of course, as is usual, they didn't see anything weird. Anyway, a few hours later, the same evening when we were getting ready for bed, I wanted to try a long exposure setting that I had found on my GoPro, so I was standing on the porch taking pictures. That is when I heard the whistle. Now, I'm not an overly superstitious man by any means, but I've heard stories, and not wanting to take my chances, I didn't return the whistle. There was a second whistle shortly after, the first, that expedited my decision to just go back inside. Weirded out, we just sort of laughed it off in the end, and made sure the doors were locked, and we went to bed. Mind you, due to the lack of air conditioning in this house, the windows were all open for airflow. An hour or so later, after we were asleep, my wife wakes me up to ask if I hear something. It was at this point that we both hear very clearly a deep growl and breathing like that of a bear or a large animal outside of our window on the porch. Not loud, but definitely very bassy. We could hear heavy footsteps on the porch as well. We woke our friends up and quickly turned all the lights on to look around. There were no footprints on the dusty porch and none in the soft mud around the porch, so this experience we really just cannot explain. Of course, our friends were asleep in their room and they didn't hear a thing, and they didn't experience the earlier sighting outside either. Nothing else weird happened while we stayed there for the rest of that trip, though. But the final thing to have happened, and this is the part that really weirded my wife out, was that a month or so later, when we were back home, we were in the kitchen making dinner when she looked up and there was an owl sitting on the fence just sort of staring into the house at us. I wasn't at that time aware of the correlation between alien sightings and abductions and the sighting of owls, but I definitely am now. To our knowledge, we didn't have any lost time events or anything like that, but it just kind of felt like we saw something that we weren't supposed to see, and maybe they were checking us out to see if we were cool. For my wife, this is all a little bit too much, and it has made her very uneasy to stare at the stars as much anymore. I, on the other hand, am still very much intrigued. We haven't noticed any more owls as of late, so who knows if it was just a coincidence or not. But I'm sharing this because I want to describe my experience and just explain it to someone out there. I would also be interested in hearing if anyone else has experienced, anything like this. I went camping with my wife and stepdaughter the other night near Laguna Mountain in California. We were off the main road in a secluded route that seldom had cars passing by. No foot traffic through the area at all, however. And we heard a noise late during the night that honestly could be explained logically by something natural, I guess. Something we just don't know about. However, my wife and I have both been losing sanity trying to understand what that noise could have been, or what could have made the noise. The first occurrence of the noise occurred around midnight, and we can only describe it as a slow, deliberate, rhythmic nail scratching on the tensioned paracord strips that were securing the tent to the ground. Naturally, we thought that it might have been a critter curious about the tent, but the slowness and the rhythm of the noise makes us believe otherwise, because critters like that generally scratch quickly and sounds more hasty, I guess. The other conclusion that leads us to believe that it wasn't a critter was because of the fact that throughout the night, we actually did hear squirrels running around outside, curious of all of our stuff that was outside. Why is that detail important? Because during the time leading up to the noise, and the time after the noise, we heard absolutely no critters outside running up to or away from the tent. Which means that whatever was creating the noise was absolutely silent coming up to and away from the tent, or, eerily enough, may have actually been floating or something of that nature. We did hear it again at around 2 a.m. the same night, and during that specific episode, the noise seemed to have shifted from one corner of the tent to the corner closer to our heads, allowing us to even feel the vibration of the scratching reverberating throughout the floor of the tent. And that's what leads me to believe that it was the taut paracord strips, because of the tension allowing the vibration to be much stronger. Now, we may have also heard the noise again a third time, but it seemed so weak and went on for such a small duration compared to the other times that we honestly couldn't really key in on the noise that time. So we aren't sure if it was actually the same thing or just our sanity playing tricks on us at that point. My wife and I were very disturbed when we heard that though, and it honestly kept us awake and on high alert for a long time. But we're very curious to know what it may have been as well, and that's why I'm here. Has anyone had a similar experience, or does anyone have an explanation as to what that could have been? I'm 23, female, and from the UK. From the ages of 9 to 11, I was best friends with this girl that we'll call Sarah. She and I formed a little group at primary school with two other girls. Their names were Lauren and Ellen, but we were each other's best friends first, as we lived so close. Sarah lived one street over from me, so I would always sleep over at her house, but she never came over to my house as we were very, very poor, and honestly I was embarrassed about the state of my house. The sleepovers became a bit of a weekly thing though, and it was just her and her mum who worked every weekend, so we spent a lot of time in the house alone. She would show me her mum's explicit material from like the 80s that all included vampires. As a 9-year-old, I had no idea what was going on, and I'd just sort of sit there blankly. She'd always say, "Doesn't it make you want to do it?" and things like that. She would also get her mum's toys and show them to me and make me hold them, which never really seemed odd to me, I guess, until I got a bit older. But even at the time, I felt uncomfortable. I was a pretty nervous child, and I struggled to make friends. so I'd often go along with whatever she said, just because I felt lucky to have a friend, outside of school that is. But she would often make up scary stories or do sort of mildly creepy things at night, like sing patty cake in a babyish voice close to my ear while I was sleeping, or pretend her dolls were alive and wanted to punish me for taking her attention away from them, which creeped me out but never outright concerned me, I guess. Though my mum was worried that I was having constant nightmares at this point. None of this affected me though too much, and so I stayed friends with her. Later that year I got mauled by a dog, Japanese Akita, and had reconstructive surgery on my face. Due to this, I had to take medication at certain times, and would be escorted to and from the school office every day by my other friend, Lauren. Because of this, we became best friends, and I started sleeping over at her house instead of Sarah's. Sarah didn't like that I was getting a lot of attention due to my fresh scar that I had, or that I had replaced her with another friend, so she said that I was pregnant at 10. Complete with tears and plans and everything, including Ellen telling her mum at the end. As kids, we really didn't even question the validity of her claim. At some point, she dropped this, and next she pretended that she had cancer. I called her out on that one, as I knew a lot about cancer because my auntie had it at the time, which she really didn't like. After that, she started calling me names, stealing my school stuff, made up lies about me, and more, making our other two friends pick me or her. It fluctuated a lot, so sometimes they'd be my friends, other times they'd be hers. During this time, though, I slept over at Lauren's a lot, and a lot of my stuff went missing. A pink flip phone that I just got as my first phone ever. This was like 2010. And my DS Lite, which was my prized possession at the time. My mum, she got involved at this point and demanded that they find it, as she knew that I'd taken it to the sleepover. In the end, Lauren supposedly found them both smashed up on a road far from either of us lived, and returned them to me completely broken weeks later. Later on, Sarah and I got invited to swimming baths for Lauren's birthday, and for once we got along like it was having my best friend back. Us kids were basically left alone in the pool to mess around for a few hours. An important note here too is that I really couldn't swim, and I still can't. I had chickenpox during school swimming lessons, and I'm terrified of water now, so I've just never learned since then. Anyway, at one point I was so sick of being stuck in the shallow end, like a baby at the age of 11, when all of my friends were swimming in the deep end. Sarah noticed this and came over to me. She offered to piggyback me and swim me to the deep end so I could play with everyone else. I was really happy to be included. I didn't even think about the fact that she didn't really regularly like me, or that if she left me, I really couldn't swim back. I just hopped right on, and she swam us out. She started mock tipping me sideways like she was going to drop me, and I cried and begged her to take me back. I was terrified of getting water in my face or going underwater. Still can't go underwater to this day. She just laughed at me though, and then dropped me, dunking me under the water and holding my head there where I struggled and I couldn't breathe. I remember struggling and being unable to breathe, but the next thing I knew, a lifeguard had pulled me to the side of the pool and I was choking on air and shaking. I also have horrible reactions to the smell of chlorine, and it makes me sneeze and my eyes swell up, so I had to be picked up, but everyone told me that it was an accident and just kids messing around. She later told me that it was just a joke. I should learn to swim and stop being a baby, which I guess is kind of true, but still, after that day, I didn't want to be around her anymore. Our friends still flip-flop between us, some days being her friend, other days being mine. But that was fine. I didn't care anymore, and I was just sick of her. I avoided her like the plague at this point. And I mean, primary school was almost over, and after that, I never had to see her again. Eventually, we all went to secondary school, ages 11 to 16, and we all went to the same one, but my school was categorized into classes, the top being the smartest, and I, Lauren, and Ellen were all in the top class, and Sarah wasn't. It was a nice buffer, and I got my best friends back, as well as making more friends for the first time ever, and so I completely forgot about her, in all honesty. But then, one day as I walked home from school, I passed the corner shop on my way home, and she was there, blocking the path, waiting for me, it seemed. Her school tie was tied around her head like a headband, and she was crying. I tried to go around her, and she growled at me and launched herself at me. I was like 4'7", 80 pounds if that, and she was much larger than me, and I'd never been in a fight, ever. I really had no idea what to do to get her off of me while she clawed at my neck and alternated kneeing me and elbowing me. I just wanted her off me. I grabbed the tie wrapped around her head and pulled her as hard as I could until she fell to the ground, and with that, she just ran away crying. I remember walking the rest of the way home so confused. I mean, what had I even done to her to deserve that? I mean, I hadn't even spoken to her in like 8 months at that point, and she and our other friends were in the same tutor group, and they hadn't mentioned anything to me. Eventually, I forgot about that too. I turned 12 a couple of months later, and the day after my birthday, I walked into school having spent all of my birthday money on new pens that I was excited to show off. I was a bit of a weird kid, I know, but first lesson of the day begins, and Ellen runs up to me and says, "Sarah's brought a knife to school. She showed me in tutor, and she said that she brought it for you." At first, I kind of laughed out loud at that, assuming that it was a joke of some kind, since any sort of weapon brought to our school was grounds for immediate expulsion, and nobody was stupid enough to try that, especially at 12 years old. I think I even made a joke about it, probably being a butter knife. She repeated, though, that apparently she was serious, that she told the teachers about it, and they'd actually called the police at this point. Again, though, I just didn't believe her. To me, it seemed crazy that they would call the police over a 12-year-old bringing a knife to school. But they did. The police arrived minutes later, and that was that. I never saw the knife, but she was immediately expelled. I don't know for sure why me or what she had planned to do, but she must have told multiple people that she was going to do something to me, because it was an ongoing joke the rest of the time that I was at school. She ended up going to the school my little sister had just started at, and she apparently also told my sister that it had been for me, but it was just a joke. Side note, my little sister is a year younger and is a fighter, and at this stage, I've still never been in a real fight, and my sister has always fought anyone who badmouthed me. She's a real one for sure, but my sister apparently punched her for that, and that was the last that I heard from her until I was like 18 years old. I turned 18 and I was at university, and then out of the blue I was tagged in an old primary school photo by Sarah. It had the whole class in it, but she tagged only me. I found this a bit odd, but didn't do anything about it, and I mean, it was on my old Facebook account anyway, so I just ignored it. A couple of months later, though, it was Sarah's birthday, and she sent me a message asking if I would come to her birthday party. Mind you, I hadn't spoken to her in like 6 years at this point, and the last time I had, I mean, she'd fought me and then brought a knife to school. So in the end, I simply ignored the message and I just moved on with my life. Later I saw that she and Lauren had reconnected and were best friends again apparently, which always concerned me as Lauren and I had stayed friends for years and she knew everything about how Sarah had treated me. But I've never really put much thought into it, other than that it's likely that they were still friends the whole time and Lauren had stolen my DS and phone because of Sarah and they'd broken them together. But the last time that I saw her, I was 19 and I was on a date with my boyfriend walking down the street, and I saw her standing at the bus stop. I wasn't really bothered since I'd neither seen or heard anything from her for years, until our eyes met, and she grinned, and pulled out her phone and started filming me until I was out of sight. Now, I have no idea why she did any of the things that she did, and I mostly feel sorry for her based on the way her life has turned out so far. But really, I still hope that I never, ever run into her again. Recently, there was an Amber Alert, and my daughter was asking me what that beeping sound was all about. For those who don't know, an Amber Alert goes out when a child is reported missing. If you receive notifications, you know what I'm talking about. The alert will sometimes give information like the victim's appearance as well as the perpetrator, the location of the abduction, make and model of a vehicle, stuff like this. Anyway, my phone started beeping one evening while helping my daughter clean her room, an Amber Alert. She asked about it. I gave her a small rundown, and that was that. However, it triggered a childhood memory that I have where I believe with all of my heart that I was almost kidnapped when I was a kid. To be clear, this isn't a memory that was laying dormant in my subconscious or anything, and this random Amber Alert and talk with my kid caused it to resurface in my mind. This incident is something that I've pondered and thought about off and on for years now. I'm a 41-year-old male, by the way. So, it's been a while since I've considered the factors and details of the experience, and this recent Amber Alert and talk with my daughter really caused me to pause and reflect on the incident itself once again. And so, here I am. As a parent, you worry about these things and you do all you can to protect your children, especially when you personally experience something truly scary just like this. Now, the occurrence happened when I was just a young kid. My guess is around 7 or 8. I can't be sure, but I think that that's a safe estimate based on the fact that much of these early childhood memories aren't really there anymore. I do remember my kindergarten experience, which I would have been 5 or 6, and also later grades as well, but this incident must have happened sometime after or maybe even around the ages of 7 to 8. My parents took me to a neighboring city to do some shopping one day. We lived in a small rural town with not much on offer, so from time to time we would go to this neighboring city, about 45 minutes from where we were located. It just had more to offer, I guess, and they would take me up there for school clothes shopping, out to eat because restaurants were better, and because my mum was a bit of a crafter. She loved to make crafts, it was her thing. There were these different craft stores and a fabric store that she liked going up to there as well. Now, on this specific trip, we went to a fabric store up there, Joanne Fabrics to be exact. This was a pretty big store. As a little kid, I guess most every place seems big, but no kidding, this was actually a pretty sizable place. My dad, he sat out in the car while I went in with my mum. He did that a lot growing up. He would just sit in the car when there was a store that he didn't want to go into, so I really can't blame him there. I can't recall exactly what all my mum was looking for or trying to get in that store that day, but I do remember what section we were in, an area with a bunch of racks with various fabrics hanging. Imagine a clothing store with circular racks with clothes hanging around them, and that's pretty much what it's like at this fabric store, racks of hanging fabrics. I remember this area being sort of slightly toward the beginning or entrance of the store. As my mum was looking through these racks, I sort of begin to wander around. Not far though, just enough to kind of look around myself. I was probably bored and started wandering around, is my guess, but I could still see my mum just up and over a few racks away, so it wasn't like I was on the other side of the store or anything. Anyway, a random man approached me, and honestly, I can't even remember at what direction he came from. It's just like I was there by myself one minute, and the next I looked up and saw this guy. It was like he came in fast and sort of out of nowhere, but I quickly looked over to where my mum was. She had moved a few racks up and away, but I could still see her. There was a fair bit of distance between my mum and me at this point, and so here I am standing behind some rack of fabric with this older guy opposite me on the other side of this rack. Then he speaks. "Hey little boy, how you doing there?" I remained silent because this took me completely off guard. He asked, "Where's your folks at? Are you alone in here?" I stood still and sort of quiet. "Come here, I got something to show you." At this point, he started advancing toward me, coming around the rack to where I was. I quickly started the other way, but he stopped and started coming around the other way as if to meet me in the middle. I was scared at this moment and became instantly aware that this man seemed a bit dangerous and like he was trying to get a hold of me. "Come here," he barked. I joked fast to the left, but he did the same. And at that point, he had this real wild look in his eyes. Whichever direction I went, he followed, but remember, there's a rack between us. Honestly as well, I'm so thankful for that rack. After some back and forth movements from me and this man, I finally lock on with my mum and yell, "Mum, help!" You would have thought that I had screamed bloody murder. It was so loud, but it got my mum's attention and did the job. "What's wrong?" she asked. This startled the man, and he looked over his shoulder in the direction of my gaze and confirmed that yes, that must be his mother. His demeanor all of a sudden completely changes, and it's as if everything is just fun and games, and he was just messing around, and he said as much to my mum. "I was just messing around with him. No harm, ma'am." My mum came to where I was, and as we reconnected, the guy just sort of tips his hat at my mum and makes his way out of the store. I explained to my mum what had just happened, that this guy was trying to get me. I was so upset and really shook up. She told me that I did the right thing by yelling and getting her attention. It was terrifying for sure though, and I'm thankful that something crazy didn't happen. Could I have been imagining things, like maybe this guy was really just messing around? I seriously doubt it. I very much think that there were nefarious intentions. I mean, why would a random older guy be perusing a fabric store? If he was there for something like crafts or fabrics, why promptly leave when confronted? To this day, I truly believe that he was up to no good. This all happened about 10 years ago. I just graduated high school and was living with my grandmother at the time. At this time, I had no idea what sleep paralysis even was, nor had I heard of any of these types of experiences. I've never done any drugs other than smoking a bit of weed every now and then, maybe 2 or 3 times a year earlier, but I've never had any problems with anything. Now one night, right before falling asleep, in a spare bedroom with all the lights off and the door closed, I felt an extremely weird and unsettling feeling in my body. My body all of a sudden felt extremely heavy and seemed sort of fuzzy. I'm really not sure how else to describe it, but I thought that I had fallen asleep and sort of woke up, only this time I couldn't move at all. As I said before, at this point in time I had never even heard of sleep paralysis. During this experience though, I seriously thought that I was dying. I assumed I was having a heart attack or something, and something was seriously wrong. Panic set in, and I began panting and trying as hard as I could to move and get up, with no success obviously. Next thing I know, a completely black silhouette of a person moved into the room from the door. It was pitch black, like as if a person was wearing a bodysuit of Vanta black. The only thing that was not completely black was its head, which appeared to be sort of black-white film static, like from an old TV. It entered the room, stood at the foot of the bed for some time, before I was able to move, and then it just suddenly disappeared. I immediately grabbed my cell phone and punched in what I had experienced in hopes of figuring out what the heck had just happened to me. This is when I learned about sleep paralysis and the shadow people that people see and experience. After that incident, I began having trouble sleeping, as I was extremely fearful of experiencing it again. I really cannot remember how much later, although all of these experiences happened within about a year's time, but eventually it happened again. This time I was visiting my siblings, living with my mother. I was in a bedroom with my younger brother who was playing a PlayStation. There was a queen bed in the room that I was laying in, and a twin mattress on the floor beside it that my brother was sitting on. Some time had passed before the last sleep paralysis experience that I had, but right before falling asleep, I felt that familiar feeling of heaviness. I tried to get up, but it was too late. I couldn't move, but again I could see the room. I assume my eyes were open, but I guess I really have no idea. But I could see my brother still sitting on the mattress toward my feet. I tried as hard as I could to yell his name, to get him to shake me in an attempt to get me out of this sleep paralysis. But this didn't work at all. With a view of the bedroom door, one after another, 4 pitch-black shadow figures entered the room. This time, they were pitch black head to toe, no static face. They slowly gathered around the bed that I was in, likely within arm's reach. They stood there for some time as I was experiencing, even to this day, the most horrifying experience that I have ever had. I mean, pure terror. Then, they all spoke. When they did, it was like a booming, omniscient voice that didn't seem to come from them specifically, but just emanated from all around me. The only words that they spoke were, "The seen cannot be unseen." They then disappeared, and I awoke, more terrified than I have ever been. Now, I've never really told this story before, and there were a couple of more experiences, I guess you could say, of sleep paralysis that I have experienced, but I did not see anything during those. Nothing like this, at least. I'm really hoping that it doesn't happen again, but quite honestly, I'm pretty fearful that it will. If you guys have any advice as to what I should do about any of this, or what this might be exactly, then please feel free to let me know, because I would genuinely appreciate the interaction. I lost my father in 2021. He passed away at the age of 56. He worked at a factory where they made paint. Due to his field, he developed scar tissue in his lungs. He had pulmonary fibrosis. He fought for 5 years, but during COVID he got bronchitis and he passed away. Shortly after his passing, I dreamed of my dad one more time prior to this time, and he was laying on his bed smiling with a thumbs up. When he appeared to me, he didn't say anything, and it was more like a feeling that I knew that it was him. He looked really young though, and he glowed, not in a movie or cartoon way, but in a sort of out-of-this-world kind of way. I ended up crying in my sleep, and my mum woke me up. I was apparently sobbing. After that time, I dreamed of him again about a year later, but this time it was different. I remember that I was in my living room, and my dad had his lazy boy recliner in the corner of the living room. That recliner was honestly his sanctuary. He spent most of his time in that chair, and I can remember seeing my dad rocking in his chair with his oxygen tank right next to him. Because of his pulmonary fibrosis, he has a very distinct cough as well. In my dream, my dad was weak and sick. He was rocking back and forth and coughing. As I got closer, his cough got more exaggerated until it eventually turned into this evil, loud sort of laugh. I also remember saying, "You're not my dad," and trying to wake up. Then I realized that I was sort of stuck. I had sleep paralysis. My mum was laying next to me. It was really hard on her losing my dad, so for the first year I moved in with her and slept with her because she hadn't slept alone in over 30 years. But it was at this point that my mother apparently felt someone get on the bed, but obviously there was nothing there, so out of fear she actually woke me up. Obviously, neither of us had spoken to each other, so this is weirdly coincidental. When she did wake me up, though, she was absolutely terrified, and she said that she felt and saw the imprint of something climbing onto the bed. A while back, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, around 2009 maybe, when I was just a child, my family went to the Dominican Republic for a spring break, and we stayed in Santo Domingo. It was an amazing trip, don't get me wrong, but I only really recall a single memory from the whole vacation. I walked into my parents' room in the rental house, which was just beside the indoor balcony, to get a swimsuit to change into. As I was walking out, I distinctly remember a creature of some sort crossed the gap between the double doors, only visible for about a second, and me being so young, decided to run back to my parents instead of chasing it. Neither of them saw it. Now, I recall it even more strongly though because I drew it multiple times afterwards as a kid. I remember it being 3 to 4 feet tall, white with short hair all over. It had human arms and hands and feet, but a head with a protruding mouth and nose. Strangest of all, its legs went backwards in a similar way to most animals, despite it walking on its 2 hind legs. I've never heard a similar story to this anywhere, so I am wondering if someone can help me. It's been in the back of my mind for at least a decade now, and I would really like to figure out what this might be. So I'm 17, and this encounter happened all the way back when COVID just started. I stayed at my grandparents' mansion at the time because my mother was working abroad. I stayed there for 6 months, and I felt uncomfortable and paranoid every day that I was in there. At November 13th, my grandma went outside to buy some groceries, while my grandpa went to the other house to drink with his other friends. That's what Filipinos do. So, being the child that I was, I decided to explore the mansion a bit. While I saw some stuff that was unnerving and kind of creepy, I didn't find them as creepy as what I saw upstairs. You see, my grandparents always had a thing for dolls. But when I saw the shadow of a little girl around the corner though, at first I thought that I was just seeing a big doll, but when I got around there, I obviously didn't. Instead, I saw the shadow of something, but I didn't see the shadow being connected to anything. What I mean is that there was just this shadow there. Shadows occur because something shines on them or something like that, right? But I didn't see anything casting a shadow, just there was a shadow there. At this, I became pretty scared and I immediately went back downstairs. But that wasn't the last time that I saw it. You see, on the same month in the middle of the night, I needed to go to the bathroom. The room that I was staying in was quite far away from the bathroom, so I had to walk for 2 minutes or so, and because I was paranoid, I grabbed my phone and opened the flashlight. I got to the bathroom normally, and when I got out, and as I was making my way back to my room, I saw that same shadow again, but it wasn't the same shadow this time. This one looked like a little boy's shadow. This time I just stayed still and I looked at it while my phone's flashlight went off because my phone was getting hot. And unfortunately, even after thinking about this encounter for so long, I really just cannot remember what happened after that. Maybe it was because it was just such a long time ago, but really, it's just black after that. I did tell my grandma about this, but she didn't believe me and just sort of laughed it off. I know that this sounds kind of like a generic thing because it happened when I was so young and all these sorts of stories do, but I just can never forget the terror that I felt when I saw those shadows. And I would really like to remember exactly what happened that night. This took place last year at the beginning of summer. I was with my mum, headed down to my nana's farm to visit for a weekend. For some context too, she lives on a farm way back in the country, right at the foot of a mountain in rural SC. It's a very rural, secluded area, so the roads are badly maintained and barely wide enough for two cars to pass one another. The houses are also spread out and set far back into the tree line from the road, so there's very little ambient light besides the headlights of a car. In any case, my mum and I are driving along, her in the driver's seat and me in the passenger. It was around 11 p.m. and we're about 15 minutes out from Nana's, deep in the woods with the radio down almost to silent. We come onto this straight stretch out of the road into a heavily wooded area, and suddenly, this blur of a creature darts out across the road, right at the edge of our headlights. It was moving pretty fast, but both me and my mum were able to get a good look at it, and both agree on what we saw. It was a fairly large creature, roughly the size of a person or bigger. Neither of us could make out the head, but we both remember it appearing to have a sort of segmented body, my mum's words, as if it were emaciated and its ribcage was poking out. The reflection of light made it hard for me to tell the color, but my mum said that she remembered it to be dark and she didn't see any fur or hair. It had long limbs, and as it moved across the road, it didn't run the way that a dog or a horse would, with all four legs. The best way to describe it would be loping, using its front limbs to pull itself along, and was moving considerably fast. We both said something along the lines of, "What the heck was that?" as it crossed in front of us. As we got up to where it had crossed, I turned to look at it, just as it reached the other side of the road and out of our headlights, and I swear on my life that it stood up and ran. Not like a dog rearing on its hind legs, it was definitely bipedal. I immediately yelled that it stood up, and we both started getting nervous. I honestly would have thought that I was going insane had I not had another person in the car with me who saw it too. My mum has always been a pretty level-headed person and not superstitious at all, but she was very nervous and made me agree not to tell my nana about it, avoiding scarring her, which made me recognize how serious this was. I should also mention that there had apparently been a series of attacks on livestock and horses in the area around this time that this happened. People were saying that they found wire fences ripped through and their animals attacked. I don't think any died, but I remember correctly that there were a few horses that were severely wounded. There have been a few other strange instances in the area too, but that was my personal experience. So I've been in my flat for 2 years now. When this happened, the people living there were myself, 20-year-old female, my flatmate Anna, 21-year-old female, and my other flatmate Joseph, 20-year-old male. Initially, weird stuff happened, like the front door would open when it was locked, or the heating would turn off and on, or the light in the bathroom would turn off and on as well. But one night, it actually scared the living daylights out of me. So I was asleep, then woke up to what I can only describe as a Slender Man looking figure over me, pressing down on me, and yelling at me to unlock my phone. Weird, I know. At first, I couldn't move or scream or anything, so I thought, well, that was a scary dream, and then stayed up the rest of the night just reading, because no way was I about to go back to sleep after that. This happened at around 3 in the morning, and I text my flatmate Anna, "Oh my goodness, the weirdest dream I have to tell you in the morning." The next morning, Anna comes to my room and was like, You won't believe this, but last night I came out of my room at around 3:30ish and saw this Slender Man thing holding your doorknob and looking like it was waiting to get into your room." At that, I gasped, as I had not told her what had happened last night yet with that figure, but apparently it was the same guy. Obviously, we're questioning life at this point, so I wake up Joseph and I ask him if anything weird has ever happened to him in the flat, and he casually goes, "Oh yeah, sometimes I see like a large figure crouching on top of my wardrobe." So yeah, my flat, it definitely seems to be haunted by this Slender Man guy. We have continued living here for another year now. Joseph moved out and another girl, Ava, 20-year-old female, moved in. Sometimes the lights still flicker and the doors open, but otherwise, no Slender Man so far this year. So I live in an apartment in Pennsylvania. The building is over 100 years old, and it's right next to a funeral home. I've been here and never had any real strange experiences. That is, up until the last couple of weeks. I should also note that I have a child that lives with me half the time, and the other half she's with her mum. Now one night, while I was drifting off to sleep, I started feeling the onset of sleep paralysis. All my limbs were going stiff and starting to feel pinned down. Luckily, I was able to snap myself out of it by reaching for the closest thing to ground myself, which was my phone. I was able to sleep fine after that. But then, maybe a week later, my daughter is asleep in her room, which connects to my bedroom through a doorway that sits directly across from my bed. I woke up and I saw the silhouette of a child standing against the wall next to the doorframe for my daughter's room. It was just this black mass darker than the room, with no face or distinguishable limbs or hair or anything, and it just seemed to stand there like it was staring at me. Her door was still closed, and the figure was on the side that would be covered by the door if it were open. I was definitely freaked out by this, but I chose to try and ignore it, turned my gaze away from it, and went back to sleep. When I woke up again a couple of hours later, it was gone like nothing had ever happened. But fast forward a few days, and my girlfriend and I are at the flea market and run into a medium selling her wares and talking to people. I told her what I was experiencing, and she looked sort of concerned and told me to cleanse my apartment by burning sage. She also gave me a small vial of holy oil to put on my front entrance to keep bad spirits away. She also wanted me to put some on my daughter's forehead to protect her. The next day, my girlfriend and I go to my apartment and we do the cleanse. And while I was cleansing a room, my girlfriend was waiting in the kitchen, which is by the front door. My girlfriend and I suddenly both hear that door slam itself shut. And crazily enough, she actually saw it happen too. But after that, my apartment has felt way more peaceful, and I even no longer get those bad vibes anymore. I do plan on moving out ASAP for different reasons, but this whole situation has me questioning everything. Years ago, my friend and I, being Ouija non-believers, decided to give it a try one day. We just wanted to put it to the test, and I mean, why not, right? So one evening, we got together and I lit a bunch of candles to light up the room by candlelight only. Even though I was skeptical about it, I started inviting anyone who wanted to communicate over and show a sign, move the planchette, whatever. I asked questions about showing a sign, is anyone here, etc. About 20 minutes in on inviting, the planchette with both of our hands on it remained motionless. But at one point, I was looking across the coffee table in which the Ouija board was on, at my friend, thinking that this is just getting boring, when I noted that one of the candles went out as the room got slightly darker. At the same time, I saw my friend's eyes move off to the left of me, and I thought that must be the candle just behind me, which obviously went out. Anyways, another 20 minutes or so and nothing. We decided to call it quits and went through the process of closing the portal as per directions. Afterwards, we were talking and considering maybe trying it again as nothing happened, or so we thought. I went to turn on the living room lamp and started blowing out the candles, noticing the candle that I thought went out was actually still lit. Whatever, but this is where it gets weird. My friend then says, don't forget the candle behind the chair. The chair sat in the corner next to the end table where the candle I thought went out was still lit. And I said, what? I didn't put a candle behind the chair, did you? He said no, but what he saw was a light behind the chair go out, and thought that I had placed a candle behind the chair in a corner. We pulled out the chair looking for a candle, but there was none. There was nothing there, in fact. So then, what caused the light, and when it disappeared, made a distinct difference in the room going dimmer? This was enough for us to stop playing around at this point, as it spooked us, since we really couldn't explain what caused the light behind the chair to go out like that. Enough for both of us to notice, even though I was actually facing away from it. Someone or something showed a sign during the time that this portal was open. We never needed nor wanted to communicate again on that board. I think that I actually ended up giving it away not too long after, or tossed it in the bin or something, but after that, never again. In my teen years, think late middle school or high school, my family had a seasonal site at a campground. I spent most of my weekends during the summer and a couple of long holidays there as well. We had a small group of friends, mostly consisting of other kids of other seasonal campers, and befriending random one-off campers was not uncommon there. But one particular weekend, towards the end of the season, I met Mike. We quickly hit it off and became really good friends, playing and trading Pokemon on our Game Boys, hanging out at fires, playing some basketball, usual camp stuff. Mike's dad had invited a few family friends for the weekend, including Andrew. Andrew was a couple of years older than me. He could drive and had a big van that he attached a tent to through the trunk to have what we thought at the time was a pretty sweet setup. For the long weekend, we all hung out too, and we had an awesome time. Come Sunday, Mike, his dad, and most of their party left. But Andrew didn't. We hung out a little bit. He would brag about dirt bikes and ATVs and TVs and other stuff that he had an abundance of, and kept implying that we should hang out sometime outside of camp. I said yeah, maybe, or something along those lines, knowing that typically camp friends were never more than camp friends. He eventually went home that Tuesday though, and I didn't hear from him after that. He gave me his number. I told him that I didn't know mine off the top of my head, but I'd call him. Important for the rest of the story, but Andrew never knew more than my first name. My mum actually remarried, and I didn't have the same last name as her or my stepdad. But fast forward about a year, I'm using AOL Instant Messenger and get a message from someone with the exact same name as me, with a number added. After a few reluctant messages, they reveal that it's Andrew. It was a bit off-putting, so I just blocked him. A second random message, him again, same name but increased the number on the screen name. We go through this for about a week, and at this point, I had blocked about 8 of his fake accounts. It gets so bad that I create a new profile with a different email and am sure to not include any personal information, though I'm still pretty sure the original account had none included anyway. But about 8 or 9 months ago, no word from him. My family is eating dinner and there's a knock at the front door. My mum calls my name and says that apparently I have a friend visiting. And when I get there, it's Andrew. We politely ask him to leave, and after about 15 or so minutes, he gives in and goes. Then the calls start. first from a number registered to him, which was screened with caller ID, then restricted numbers, again ignored, then from random numbers with local area codes. When he does get through screenings, usually from younger siblings, he acts like we are best friends, asking me to hang out, offers me free stuff, and I told him to stop calling, but he didn't. My mum tells him that I've moved in with my dad, but the calls kept coming anyway. Eventually, my mum tells him that she's going to call the police, and things die down a bit. One more year passes, and I'm back at the campground. I'm walking a lady friend that I had met that weekend back to her campsite, and this van pulls up alongside of us, and I hear someone call my name. I look over to see Andrew leaning out of his van again. We booked it and ran into the small patch of woods and got back to my family site, and I tell my mum what's going on, and she flips her lid. She ends up pounding on the campground owner's door, waking them up as it's about 11 p.m. at this point. The police get involved, and he's told to never contact me or show up at my house again. A family staying at the campground came over to talk to my parents the next morning, and apparently they knew Andrew's parents and told them stories about episodes that he would have, and he would need multiple people to hold him down until he would calm down, because he would lose control and start acting sporadically and even violently. I saw him once after that too, about 3 years later, driving that very same van slowly out of an apartment complex that I had moved into. Nothing really ever came of it, but I know that he saw me, and the fact that I never saw him again makes me feel uneasy about what he was doing there that day to begin with. I have lived in this same house for a decade now. The old lady who used to live here died, and her best friend still lives next door, and I'm really not sure how long she has left. But this house, it's always been sort of spooky, I guess. It's always cold, it's really old, and I've had weird experiences for years as well. It's very common for me to hear footsteps, doors opening and closing, my cat staring in random corners. My front door once opened and slammed closed by itself, and my mother saw an apparition of a Victorian lady in the front hallway in the middle of the night. I was also once home alone, showering downstairs, and heard someone aggressively pacing back and forth in my room, and opening or slamming closed my drawers as well. However, after a while, I guess you just get used to it, and you accept the flow of things. For a while, the activity died down, in fact, and things seemed less scary. Plus, I moved away for university, so I got a huge break from the spooky stuff. But now that I'm back, the activity seems to have spiked a bit. You see, a few nights ago, I was having a particularly hard mental health day, up at about 4 a.m. and facing the wall trying to sleep with my back to the door. My radio is always on at low volume and the music was playing, but I suddenly hear the voice of a woman behind me, almost groaning. It sounded like she was letting out all the air out of her lungs, almost wheezing. Obviously, I freaked out at that, and when I looked, there was no one. Yesterday, I was FaceTiming my boyfriend, and I hear footsteps in my house again, which I haven't heard in months. Distinct paces up the stairs, shuffling on the floorboards. I was genuinely scared and even thought that it was an intruder, but no, there was no one. I am scared that perhaps I'm manifesting some serious mental health issues. I've never heard a woman before in this house, and the wheezing was so clear that it was frightening. I don't want to sound dramatic, but I'm so scared of losing my sanity, and I don't know, perhaps I am, but my house has always been spooky, and this sudden spike has no explanation. I'm going to try and smudge the house with some herbs that I gathered to feel a little safer, so do wish me luck. This is a nightmare that has stayed with me for years, and it really felt like something supernatural or paranormal was happening to me. Let me first start off though with the way that my apartment was set up. This is important too. So I rented an apartment out of a house. Landlord lived in half of the house, our apartment was the other half. The living room looks like it used to be one big room, but was later divided by a set of French doors to make the bedroom area. So when facing the French doors in bed, I can see through the living room windows and across the rooms. I couldn't breathe though one day. I sprung awake in bed with a cold sweat, erratically breathing, shaking, and slight dizziness. It must be my blood sugar. Let me check. 155. No, I'm not low. I started panicking because I don't know what's wrong, only increasing my symptoms. I decided to go into the bathroom and splash my face with some water and use a washcloth to dry up. I hung it on the towel rack and I made my way back to the bedroom. But on the way back, I was stopped in my tracks. Suddenly, I couldn't move. It felt like in a dream when you're trying to walk or run and you feel like your legs are filled with cement. I started going down, desperately trying to drag myself across the floor to reach the foot of my boyfriend to wake him up for help, when all of a sudden I wake up in my bed, fuzzy. What? I guess that was a dream too. I quickly drifted back to sleep. I woke up again shortly after, as I often do in the middle of the night. I roll over to get comfy and I face the living room window. The blinds are mostly closed, but are askew so that you can see out the bottom half of the window. And I see a silhouette standing there. I roll back over to wake up my boyfriend in a panic, but before I can wake him, I woke up again. Another dream. I roll back over to the window again, and now I see a face in the window. The best that I can describe it, it kind of looked a bit like Darth Maul from Star Wars or that demon from Insidious. I rolled over to my boyfriend in a panic again, and the same thing happened. Before I can wake him up, I wake up from a dream, or so I thought. I rolled over to the window side again, and now it's in the living room. I wake up in bed again thinking, whoa, I've had dreams where I thought that I woke up, but never multiple times like this. I roll over, and now it's right outside the set of French doors. I wake up again, and now it's on the bedroom side of the doors. Again, now it's standing next to me. Again, now it's at the foot of my bed just staring at me. Again, still standing and staring. I repeat this process at least 10 or 15 more times, and each time an aura of dread filled the air. The feeling of primal fear was just terrible. It never really attacked me, but it did pull on and sharply scratch my legs a few times, it seemed. Every time that I woke up and I see it, it's still there. I start slapping myself, pulling on my hair, scratching myself, screaming at it, and anything that I could think of to try and wake myself up from these nightmares again and again and again. Eventually, I wake up after what seems like hours of this. I look around and the room is empty. No Darth Maul demon anywhere to be seen. And it seems like I'm finally awake for real this time. Tears of fear and relief come into my eyes when I realize that this horrible dream is over. I lay back down and I snuggled up to my boyfriend, being the big spoon, and decided to wake him up for some much-needed comfort. I shake him awake and he slowly rolls over to face me, except it's not him. It's this thing. I go to scream, but before I can, I wake up again. The feeling of dread has completely vanished, and I slap myself a few times just to make sure that I'm awake this time, and it seems that I finally am. It's around 4 in the morning, and I am absolutely exhausted, but after that, I'm definitely not falling back asleep again, and the search of the house, that would have to wait until daylight hours. I was way too scared to leave the bed again, but once a few more hours had passed, I decided to get out of bed. I was wondering how much of the night was part of the dream. Did I really wake up in a cold sweat, or check my blood sugar, or even go to the bathroom to wash up at all? I checked my glucose monitor, and there was the result. time-stamped around when I remember getting up the first time. Then I checked the bathroom and the wet washcloth is hanging on the towel rack. So apparently I did wake up in a cold sweat, did test my blood sugar, even went in to go to the bathroom. I have no explanation for what happened after this, but this much seems to have happened. If I did go to the bathroom and if I did pass out on the floor, how did I wake up in bed that first time? I know that all this sounds nuts, but I think that maybe my body went back to bed after washing my face, but somehow I or my consciousness stayed behind in the bathroom or something. My body was asleep, but my soul was perhaps somewhere else. I've never experienced anything like this prior or after, no matter how many times I've tried to replicate it. There must be a logical medical explanation for this, or maybe I had a reaction to something, but I don't know. It was unlike any nightmare that I've had before, and I've had them frequently. This one, though, just felt so different. This isn't the first time that I've experienced something paranormal either. I'm fairly convinced that my childhood home was haunted, or some kind of paranormal sensitivity runs on my mother's side of the family. My childhood home is also my mother's childhood home. My grandma lives with us too. We're upstairs and she's downstairs. And her mother, my great-grandmother, lived there as well and slept in my grandmother's current bedroom, but passed on before I was born. Also, before I was born, the house was only one level. My great-grandmother who passed, she was blind and mostly deaf toward the end. And it's not uncommon for patients like this to hallucinate, auditorily, visually, or tactically. And she always saw and heard people coming through the walls, windows, heard scratching and banging, felt people touching her. Again, it's probably nothing. But considering the other experiences, I don't know, there might be some validity, even if it is exaggerated. My grandmother frequently feels someone sitting down on the foot of her bed at night. When my mother and father were first dating and he spent the night, once he woke up to see a woman rocking back and forth in a rocking chair knitting. When he described what she looked like to my mum, it sounded a lot like her grandmother. My mum claims to be able to astral project, not on purpose, it just happens apparently. And in these dreams, she can fly around and even into houses that we've never been in, only for her to confirm that it's what the house looked like after visiting or being invited into the neighbor's house. Also, some other first-hand experiences that I've had in this place is that my bed would randomly shake, as if there's a sort of small earthquake going on, or if a really big truck rolled past the house or something. But there was never anything there, and no earthquakes either. I lived in New York, so earthquakes weren't a regular thing by any means. I felt taps on my shoulder from behind when alone in my kitchen. Once I woke up in the middle of the night to grab some water from the kitchen and realized that my dog was growling. Then this shadow figure ran right through me. There was also this time that almost every picture in the house of a late relative all fell off the walls at once. And well, I know that this all sounds like complete BS. All of this probably does, but sometimes I dream of the future, and not anything major, like I'm walking down a road I've never been on before. Then within the next few days, I'm in an area that looks exactly the same as my dream. I know that this could be something else like deja vu, but sometimes I wake up with injuries that I'd suffer in a dream, like scratches and bruises. But I'm also super clumsy, so that could be an explanation for that at least. Also, for whatever reason, streetlights frequently go out when I walk under them, and I get this feeling and can sort of tell when one will. I'm not sure if it's related to all of this, but it's super creepy, let me tell you. Anyway, I just wanted to get this off my chest, and thank you for listening, even if you don't believe in all this and you don't believe my words. It's nice to be able to have my paranormal TED Talk and just get this all out.